Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here, and I'm fairly certain this is the most anticipated video on my channel so far. That's right, we're here to cover the lore of Fate Grand Order's 7th Lostbelt, Nahui Miclan, Golden Sea of Trees. While not as dense as the British Lostbelt, this quote-unquote South American Lostbelt is arguably way more important than any other chapter. That said, it somehow manages to give us more questions than it does answers. Our understanding of Chaldea and its ultimate goal hinges upon the shocking revelations made here in Mictlan. Instead of reaching the finale, it appears we're only now just getting started. Mind you, my lore videos are not merely summaries. I provide an overview analysis that reveals information in the most concise and effective manner. If you want to see the story played live for drama, I already streamed my entire Lostbelt 7 journey. Now, it's time to make sense of all this, so let's jump right in. The story picks up right where it left off at the end of Traum. Be sure to watch my video on that before proceeding. We were in a singularity based around a perpetual Holy Grail war orchestrated by a single master. James Moriarty, a newer recruit to the alien god's alter egos, took us straight to the singularity's heart. It was Area 51, the site where Specimen E had been taken and tortured. After all this time hearing about it from David Bluebook, Chaldea finally gets to see Specimen E up close. Yet, it's quite weird, isn't it? We've got two things in this lab. There's a human-shaped network of nerves on the floor, and a single stick sitting on the operating table. Which one's the real specimen? Hard to say, really, and we don't exactly have time to find out. The Traum singularity begins to collapse, forcing Ritsuka, Mashu, and Katak to flee. Before leaving, Ritsuka tries to retrieve the specimen, only for it to disintegrate. Luckily, Mashu scanned its data ahead of time, so at least we have something for our computer system, Trismegistus II, to analyze. Back on the storm border, Ritsuka gets a chance to rest. While talking to Katak, Sion reveals that she suspected Sherlock was an apostle of the alien god all along. Apparently, when Sherlock synced with Tri-Hermes way back in the Camelot singularity, the sheer volume of data should have killed him, meaning that he obviously wasn't a normal servant. Now, you'd think it's strange for Sherlock to be helping us like he did. Isn't the foreign god our enemy? Suspiciously, it seems that, to some degree, the alien god actually wants us to clear the other Lostbelts. It was only after its goals and ours diverged that Sherlock had to choose between one of us. To avoid betraying us, he let himself perish in the fight against Moriarty. Up until this point, Chaldea's been under the impression that Specimen E was an alien that made its way to Earth. Scientists at Area 51 tormented the poor thing, trying to test its limits. Specimen E's cries served as a distress signal that ultimately got the attention of the alien god. Said god came to avenge Specimen E by bleaching the Earth and trying to supplant proper human history with one of the Lostbelts. In Olympus, the alien god finally descended upon us in a physical form, suspiciously using our late director Olga Marie as a vessel. Calling herself u-olga Marie, the alien god seems to want to wipe out the human history that tormented Specimen E. Technically, she's chosen to manifest as a servant, specifically Beast 7, and is strong enough to generate black holes on command. Despite this, she could stand to gain even more power. Thus, under the guidance of her apostle, Kirei Kotomine, she aims to swap her vessel with that of a creature presiding in the 7th Lostbelt. That creature is called Ort, or One Radiant Thing. Basically, it's yet another alien, one that came to Earth long ago. It now sleeps in a dormant state in South America, waiting for the day Earth itself finally decides to exterminate humanity. That's sort of the long-term endgame for the Nasu-verse, at least in certain timelines. You see, Nasu wrote this story called Notes, or Angel Notes, that deals with humanity's dystopian future. Ort is one of the creatures that supposedly bring about this dystopia. After repeatedly getting killed from contacting this giant space spider, mages have decided to just let Ort keep sleeping until Earth wakes it up. In other words, there's not a damn thing we can do to stop it. To clarify, Ort's main body is this weird UFO in back, and its spider legs are merely bonus appendages. Back when Nasu hadn't given us much to go on, fans speculated that Oort was synonymous with Type Jupiter. Ultimate Ones, or Types, are supposedly creatures born from celestial bodies in our universe as they enter their final stage of life. Notes deals with several types in our solar system, uniting to wipe out humanity. We now know that Oort is actually the ultimate one of the Oort cloud, a collection of icy debris that surrounds the Milky Way galaxy. Supposedly, in Tsukihime timelines, Oort is also a dead apostle ancestor, though I wouldn't worry much about that until Nasu actually develops it further. For now, you just need to know that Oort is a hungry space spider that can easily wipe us all out, so we're lucky that it's asleep. U-olga wants to make Oort her new vessel, which would make her completely unstoppable. We're gonna have a hard enough time defeating her as is. On that note, we've been preparing for our final battle with Olga. Thanks to the fairy Artoria from Lostbelt 6, Chaldea now has the formula for Excalibur, which has been integrated into the Stormborder as a new weapon, the Hume Barrel Rayproof. It channels the Earth's might into an energy blast designed to vanquish threats to humanity, such as beasts. Confident that this will obliterate Olga, we zero sail into the 7th Lostbelt and fire it at her. Despite everything we've done in preparation, the blast itself doesn't seem to hurt her. It's as though the alien god isn't actually registering as a threat. Uh-oh. Turns out, neither the foreign god's true nature nor this Lostbelt are what we initially pegged them as. With all that prologue out of the way, we can finally see what's going on here. Despite being geographically located in South America, where Oort sleeps, this Lostbelt's relevant culture derives from Central or Mesoamerica, specifically the Mayan and Aztec civilizations. Given that Lostbelts are an alternative history, it'll be helpful for us to understand the actual history of things first. In a very reductive sense, Mayan civilization existed first, as early as 2600 BC, with most of its influence coming between the years 250 and 900 AD. The Mayans were not a unified empire, but rather a broad range of peoples occupying Mexico and Central America. The Aztec Empire, however, formed from an alliance between 3 city-states that united to rule over the Valley of Mexico. Similar to the link between Greek and Roman mythology, cultural elements from the Mayans found their way into Aztec culture as well. For example, the Mayan god Kukulkan was later adapted by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl. FGO treats all of this as a big melting pot of Latin American influence. The most important thing to note is that both the Mayans and Aztecs believed their gods came from outer space. 66 million years ago, a mass extinction event known as the Chicxulub impact occurred. An asteroid collided with the Yucatan Peninsula, altering the Earth's climate enough to wipe out the dinosaurs. This was actually one of 5 prehistoric events that caused mass extinction. In myth, it is thought that this asteroid carried with it alien bacteria, or as fate calls them, divine filaments. These microorganisms are thought to have restored the region's plant life and ultimately chose humanity as the dominant species. After combining with human vessels, these divine filaments were worshipped as gods who would actually change their vessels over time. Giving up hope of returning to space, the filaments entrusted humanity with their future, living vicariously through them. So just who were these gods anyway? The Lostbelt focuses on 5 of them. Kukulkan, worshipped as a feathered serpent, was a god of wind and water, presiding over destructive storms. She is sometimes treated as the same being as Itzamna, the Mayan creator god, so she too is attributed with the creation of Mayan civilization. The version of her we meet in the Lostbelt is quite different, so we'll come back to her a bit later. Next up is Tezcatlipoca, who is technically a set of 4 gods known to the Aztecs as Creator Brothers. They're differentiated by color, as well as cardinal direction. The main one is Black Tezcatlipoca, representing north. Sometimes portrayed as a spider or black jaguar, this Tezcatlipoca presides over darkness, making him the Lord of Night. In Fate's portrayal, he is obsessed with war and conflict, finding it perfectly normal for warriors to kill each other in battle. There is honor and meaning in this death, just as there is meaning in the humans who sacrifice themselves to honor him. In any given conflict, he doesn't take sides. The only side he's on is of warfare itself. Ironically, Tezcatlipoca's greatest rival happens to be his own white variant, Quetzalcoatl, god of the West. He's the polar opposite, a god of life and lord of the day. Quetzalcoatl rejected the need for human sacrifice and battled Tezcatlipoca over their differences. Neither one was deemed good or evil necessarily, but in the end, Quetzalcoatl was defeated, venturing to Venus, promising to one day return to guide humanity. Somewhere between the two is the blue Tezcatlipoca, also referred to as Huitzilopochtli, ruler of the South. Despite being a god of the sun and war, he seems far less brutal than his black variant. Oddly enough, the name Huitzilopochtli will be relevant regarding another servant featured in this Lost Belt. The circumstances are kinda strange, though. The last aspect of Tezcatlipoca, the red one ruling over the east, is a god called Xipa Totec. He's hardly in this story, so let's not waste any brain cells on him. One of Tezcatlipoca's other brothers is Tlaloc, the Aztec god of rain. People worshipped him as a giver of life, as well as the bringer of storms and lightning. It should be noted that, due to strange circumstances, Tlaloc proper does not appear in this Lost Belt. To be perfectly honest, there's so much more depth to each of these gods, but Nasu only touches on their most basic elements for this story. We could easily spend hours on each of them. The last god I want to mention from proper human history is Camazotz, a blood-sucking bat god who ravages the Mayan underworld of Xibalba. They appear in the written story Popolva as a swarm of bat spirits that attack Mayan hero twins Huanapu and Xibalanque. The version of Camazotz we see in this Lost Belt is completely different. I did mention the Mayan underworld of Xibalba, though. It's also worth noting that the Aztec underworld is known as Mictlan. According to mythology, Mictlan is separated into 9 distinct layers, or strata, each serving as a trial for those who die as they seek the bottom. Specifically, Mictlan is where those who die of natural causes go, and the trials serve to strengthen them so they can return to the living world. A separate domain, Teteocan, would be where warriors, mothers, and children would go after death. Regardless of the destination, death played a huge role in Mesoamerican culture, and the entire Lost Belt is based around it. Once again, we have to ask the age-old question, do people die if they are killed? Before we actually get to the Lost Belt's timeline, we need to cover what happened to the Aztecs in proper human history. There's a famous anecdote regarding the empire's collapse. Its last king, Moctezuma II, ruled from the capital city of Tenochtitlan, a marvelous metropolis built atop Lake Texcoco. A false legend theorizes that Moctezuma, desperate to witness the return of Quetzalcoatl, mistook Hernán Cortés of the Spanish conquistadors as the late god. He naively let Cortés and his men into the city, only for them to attack and topple the Aztec Empire. In truth, Moctezuma instead hoped that inviting foreign influence could help him put an end to his empire's tradition of ritual sacrifice. Regardless of the motive, however, the Aztec Empire fell all the same. Cortés rallied other tribes who resented the Aztecs and used them to storm Tenochtitlan. Tragically, rather than blame the invaders, Moctezuma's own people blamed him for welcoming Cortés in the first place. In the end, he was stoned to death, suffering from a fatal head injury. Keep that in mind as we proceed. As with all Lost Belts, this one exists from a major divergence point in proper human history. Remember how I said a meteor killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago? That doesn't happen here. Instead, that same meteor had a different trajectory, causing it to land much earlier. Specifically, the meteor collided with Earth 316 million years ago, predating the dinosaurs it would otherwise have wiped out. Those divine filaments that were on the meteor? Well, they decided to prevent Earth from breaking into separate continents. At the time, it was all still one single supercontinent we call Pangaea, and the filaments kept it that way. Instead of humans, who weren't around at the time, the filaments chose dinosaurs as the planet's dominant intelligent life. By blessing ordinary dinosaurs, they created a superspecies known as the Dainos. Unlike your average dino, these guys are much smarter and stronger. They communicate telepathically with each other and can defend themselves with biowaves that act like electromagnetic armor. Also, the Dainos are herbivores, subsisting on corn and photosynthesis. To them, the alien filaments who guide the Dainos are collectively known as the Maya. For a solid 234 million years, the Dainos lived peacefully with the Maya. However, just like the divine filaments, our freaky spider Ort also exists in this lost belt. It comes in riding on a second meteor that, like the first, winds up striking 66 million years earlier than it did in proper human history. Anticipating Ort's arrival as an extinction event, the Maya chose to restructure the planet into a bunker where the Dainos could evacuate. To be more specific, they bore a hole into the Earth's surface, an abyss shaped like a paper towel tube. This became the Lostbelt version of Mictlan, though it wouldn't have a proper name until much later. It's a subterranean cylinder spanning 9 regions. Abandoning the surface, the Maya took the Dainos with them. To light the underground tunnel, the Maya formed themselves into an artificial sun that both ascends and descends on a cycle. Despite all this effort, Ort's impact penetrated the surface and became lodged into Mictlan's deepest layer. Not only was the surface reduced to volcanic destruction, but the very creature the Maya wanted to protect against was bypassing that protection by crashing the party anyway. Luckily, Ort was so damaged from the fall that it went into hibernation, sleeping just like our own, for a while anyway. This allowed the Dainos to prosper for another 60 million years, until a whole other issue emerged. Running out of energy, the Maya's sun burnt out, plunging Mictlan into darkness. No longer able to photosynthesize, the Dainos went into hibernation, allowing for a completely different race to evolve. Over the span of 100,000 years, humans finally emerged and thrived in the darkness, subsisting off the Earth's geothermal heat. These human ancestors eventually united as the Kingdom of Khan, ruled over by their charismatic king, Camazotz. He guided his people through the darkness, until Ort suddenly woke up and began ravaging Mictlan. At first, the people of Khan stood no chance against Ort. They saw it as an immortal monster who could only be defeated by another immortal. Thus, all of Khan's residents chose to sacrifice themselves, offering their lives to Camazotz. Even the remaining Maya put their faith in the King of Khan, transforming him into an unkillable bat god. As the very last of his kind, Camazotz fought Ort relentlessly with a spear. Eventually, he took flight and pierced Ort's main UFO-shaped body, gouging out its still-beating heart. Though Camazotz was nearly erased in the process, he won, vanquishing Ort back to the bottom of Mictlan. Mind you, Ort hadn't died, but simply returned to sleep. Before it started its nap, though, Ort desperately gobbled down and fused with the Lostbelt's fantasy tree, Quasar. In doing so, its fate became tied to the Lostbelt's, or more appropriately, Ort just made the Lostbelt its bitch. Had Camazotz destroyed Ort's heart, the damn thing would just regenerate. But by keeping the heart alive and sending healthy biosignals, the Maya were able to return Ort to its dormant state. They then fused with Ort's heart to make the core of a brand new artificial sun. Finally, the Dainos were able to return as Mictlan's dominant species. Camazotz, being unable to die, regenerated his body and spent his years terrorizing the Dainos and lamenting the loss of his former kingdom. He eventually learned to discard his past, finding it easier to forget what happened. He's now closely linked to the underworld, reigning supreme over its 8th layer. Like a necromancer, he can revive his fallen comrades as undead skeleton warriors. Ort's defeat sparked a renaissance of developments in Mictlan. For one, Mictlan birthed a special dinosaur meant to serve as its archetype. Not sure if I've mentioned it before or not, but an archetype is like a planet's sense of touch, a primordial being through which the planet's will can act. In proper human history, archetype Earth happens to be the vampiric true ancestor Arcuade Brunstud. In this Lost Belt, her role is taken by Shkik, a white diplodocus with the perpetual mind of a 1-year-old, at least according to the story. Rather than the drooling toddler that makes me think of, she's actually extremely wise, observing all of Mictlan from its isolated Mictlan region. When I say she takes Arcoade's role, I mean that almost literally. For some reason, Shkik is hinted to be like the dinosaur version of Arcoade, without all the vampire stuff. Unfortunately, she is forever trapped in her observatory until Mictlan meets its end. What that means is up for debate. Even if the Lost Belt itself survives, its new artificial sun will eventually burn out like the previous one. This would spell the end for Danos' kind, but it wouldn't do much to people like Camazotz who thrive in the darkness. Shkik even has her own dinosaur Shikitono. That would be our Lost Belt buddy Tepeo, an especially smart Danos who meets Shkik at the observatory and falls in love with her. Hoping to free her from captivity, he spends years searching to no avail. I suppose this is as good a time as any to mention Danos culture. You see, Danos are presumed to be the perfect species. They live for millions of years, hardly wanting anything, because they already have what they need to survive. They have no real concern for their respective differences, and thus don't fight each other. This has left them seeing the world almost passively, rarely ever acting towards an individual goal. Danos like Tepeo are rare in that regard. Another exception would be Priest Fukub. For the most part, as Danos are born, the Maya prioritize land-dwelling species. Flying dinos, like pterosaurs, have been a rarity, and Fukub is the last of his kind. In that regard, he feels superior to other Danos, and his insecurities make him more likely to lash out. Unfairly seeing Tepeo as a threat, Fukub sent assassins to try and kill him on many occasions. As a result of all these near-death experiences, Tepeo inadvertently developed mystic eyes of death perception. Just like Shikitono, he wears a pair of glasses to keep these eyes at bay. After all, Tepeo's a pacifist, for the most part anyway. What's crazy is that Tepeo made the glasses himself, whereas in Tsukihime, they were originally made by Toko Aozaki. Our dino's on the same tier as a renowned mage. Also, inspired by what remained of Kamazotz's kingdom, the Danos chose to construct their own city, Chichen Itza. Another 6 million years pass, and that's when we're finally introduced to Mictlan's cryptor, Daybit Sem Void. He's got quite the strange backstory. Essentially, Daybit used to accompany his dad, who was a researcher collaborating with the Clock Tower's Department of Lore. Also named after its Lord Brishsan, the Department of Lore studies both angelic and demonic anomalies that have yet to be linked with any particular legend. In other words, they study alien artifacts that transcend the bounds of human understanding or mythology. Due to its secrecy, this department is the smallest in the association. A divine construct like Excalibur can be easily traced back to its mythological roots. Something like Ort, however, is a complete mystery to us, and would fall under Brishsan's jurisdiction because of it. Might be wiser to call it the Department of Alien Stuff. Anyway, Daybit's dad had been studying Semitic tribes, and got his hand on a mysterious angelic artifact they've been passing down for generations. Known only as the Wooden Halo, this strange thing became the focus of his research. On inspection, the halo wouldn't technically do anything. Instead, you could just look through it and see nothingness on the other side. Neither Daybit nor his dad had any idea its activation would be so obscure. Basically, the halo only responds when a full day passes without anyone dying in its surrounding 20-kilometer radius. In this case, a massive chunk of London would have to be fatality-free for 24 hours. No wonder they couldn't get the thing to work. Perhaps that was for the best, though, because one day in 2004, Daybit and his dad were in their lab with the halo when it finally went off. For a brief time, all the spells active in the clock tower suddenly froze. It emitted a malicious aura before dissolving the two of them on an atomic level. Effectively, the two of them were instantly erased from all existence, kinda like Musashi being erased in Olympus. Of the two, Daybit would be the sole survivor, re-emerging a split second later, though I suppose calling it survival is debatable. The 10-year-old boy stood in the lab, where he and his dad's shadows had been permanently burned into the floor. Ain't no ShamWow good enough to clean that stain. Nobody could remember Daybit or his dad ever existed, aside from himself and perhaps Brish's son, who's been alive since the Age of Gods. To everyone else, it was as if Daybit simply blipped into existence for the first time at the age of 10 with no backstory. Ever since, Daybit chose to continue his studies at the clock tower, albeit for a different reason than other mages. Given the nature of atomic reconstruction, one could argue that this Daybit was no longer the same boy prior to the Halo's activation. Even though his body, DNA, memories, and identity were all identical, he still felt like an outsider, like a foreign invader no different than the Halo itself. To further hammer this home, Daybit emerged from the incident with a bizarre defect. Even though he's alive and breathing all day, every day, he can only retain around 5 minutes worth of memories from one day to the next. Luckily, he's able to choose which moments he remembers, but even then, that's not a lot to work with. For instance, he used to watch movies with his dad, specifically American films with Clint Eastwood. Trying to do that now would be almost pointless. At best, he could read a plot synopsis or something. My point being, if Daybit wants to actually remember things, he's gotta be selective and efficient, never wasting time if he can help it. As another side effect, Daybit could see the world on a cosmic scale. He learned to see the big picture of things, which caught the attention of Chaldea's founder, Marisbury Enemisphere. Recall that, in the beginning, Chaldea was established as an observatory that would monitor our planet's future via a simulated reconstruction called Chaldeus. Effectively, this gave humanity a heads up whenever they were about to go extinct. If not for Lev Liners sabotaging the operation from within, we would have seen Gaetia's incineration coming way ahead of time. Well, before Marisbury actually built Chaldeus, he consulted Daybit for his cosmic perspective. The two of them worked on a way to monitor all 18.8 billion light-years of our universe. To a normal person, this would all seem like a good thing. I mean, who wouldn't want to secure the human order from complete annihilation? This whole time, we've been fighting to return proper human history back to normal. To make this happen, though, Marisbury and Daybit would have to hide their intentions from their allies, the Mages Association, and even the planet's counterforce. Why? I'm not sure. Thing is, Daybit saw that something about this plan was very suspicious. On a grander scale, he perceived Marisbury's objective to be a bad thing. As Daybit himself puts it, if Marisbury's plan succeeds, humankind will be despised across the universe as the worst, lowest form of intelligent life. Why that is, I have no clue. What I do know is that Daybit has been trying to thwart Chaldea's original objective. By the time he came to this decision, though, Chaldea was already complete, and Marisbury was the only one who could shut it down. Thus, Daybit pulled a gun on Marisbury, hoping the director would decommission his own creation. Instead, he put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger, guaranteeing Chaldeus would thrive. At that point, Daybit had no choice but to play along as one of the cryptors. Wow, so that's what happened. Glad we finally have an answer to that mystery. Too bad FGO immediately swaps that answer with an even crazier question. Just what the hell is Chaldeus? I mean, if you're still watching, I assume you're ready for anything, but here's the big spoiler. Essentially, Chaldeus isn't just a simulation. Thanks to displacement magecraft, what we're looking at is a genuine planet in its own right. It may resemble our Earth, but it's a separate world, dare I say an alien world. Rather than a being from some other universe, the alien god we've been fighting all this time came from within the world of Chaldeus. This whole Lostbelt ordeal, along with Earth's bleaching, may very well be part of Marisbury's plan. For example, when Koyanskaya, Rasputin Kire, and Anastasia launched their attack on Chaldea during the prologue, they weren't there to destroy Chaldeus. No, in fact, Anastasia's ice was chosen deliberately as a means of preserving Chaldeus. They wanted us out so we wouldn't make that discovery. Sherlock aside, the only other person who could have figured it out was Da Vinci, which is exactly why Kire stabbed her through. By the time Da Vinci could return with her backup body, we'd already moved on to more pressing matters, and so the secret remained. It all definitely makes this dinosaur adventure pale in comparison to what's still ahead of us. Recall that all the cryptors were killed when Lev Liner blew up the command room. Daybit and his other members of Team A were put on ice in their coffins, just in case they could be revived once the incineration of humanity came to pass. The alien god then reached out to these cryptors, namely Kirshtaria, and offered them new life in exchange for their servitude. As a test of their will, the alien god had the cryptors simulate fighting through Gaetia's 7 singularities. Like a boss, Kirshtaria chose to complete this task a total of 6 times, compensating for the other cryptors. Daybit, however, didn't need any help. In fact, he completed this hypothetical trial all on his own, without ever summoning a single servant. In lieu of a servant, Daybit acts as the terminal of the Dark Star. Basically, ever since the Wooden Halo's activation, he's been linked to alien life from a locale more than 14 billion light-years away. This allows him to summon foreign Dark Star creatures as his personal familiars. They tend to get stronger in proportion to his opponent's strength, allowing him to beat every singularity foe that Ritska had faced. Even in a hypothetical scenario, a series of dream battles, this was impressive. At that point, he and Kirshtaria revived on the bleached Earth, each with their own separate goals. We know Kirshtaria wanted to evolve humanity into gods, and for as strong as he was, Daybit had a feeling Chaldea would succeed in reaching the final Lost Belt anyway. His own plan would supersede all others. Presumably, the only, or most efficient way Daybit can think of to destroy Chaldeus is to unleash Ort on the planet. Even though we're talking about this Lost Belt's Ort, and not the one from proper human history, Daybit's confident it can chew its way out of the Lost Belt and impede on proper Earth. Thus, as soon as he arrived in this Lost Belt, he made his way down Mictlan. He even fought Kamazots to a standstill with just a single command spell. At the very bottom, he found Ort's sleeping corpse and decided to try and heal its wounds. There's just one problem, though. Even if he can gather the necessary materials to rebuild Ort's body, the deepest layers of the underworld can only be accessed for a brief period each year. The rest of the time, Ort naturally emits cosmic rays that seal it away from everyone else. It becomes like a poisonous fog that keeps everyone out. Since it would take Daybit more than a couple of days to gather his goods, he had to bail out of the depths and wait a whole year for a second chance. By the time we arrive, that year has nearly passed. That doesn't mean Daybit was just gonna sit around, though. In the meantime, he finally decided to summon a servant. With his goal being the destruction of humanity, it wasn't surprising that the one he summoned was the Black Tezcatlipoca I mentioned earlier. Technically, we already met him back in the Indian Lost Belt. When Daybit came to bid farewell to Peperoncino, Tez was there hiding behind a cloak. He's not just any servant either. He took up the mantle of Grand Assassin after King Hassan rescinded it back in Babylonia. He's a divine spirit, and normally that would invalidate him from the role of Grand, but there's a catch. Similar to how the divine filaments manifested in human bodies, he himself constructed a human vessel to appear in. I suppose that was his way of limiting his divinity to fit in a servant saint graph. In any case, Tezcatlipoca was thrilled about the chance to acquaint himself with modern tools of warfare, along with waking up Ort, of course. To clarify, this Tez is the one from proper human history. The Lost Belt itself doesn't have the concept of gods. The Danos don't even revere the Maya like that. At the same time, when Daybit summoned Black Tezcatlipoca, it appears he also summoned the god's blue aspect. Unlike the Black one, however, he wasn't especially keen on helping Daybit destroy the world. For a while then, the blue guy just spent his time riding Danos and such. So, just how would Daybit and Tez heal Ort? Ritual sacrifice, of course. Having been blessed by the Maya, Danos hearts have a great deal of energy. By gathering enough of these hearts, it's possible to fuel Ort's regeneration. In proper human history, though, it was humans who sacrificed each other to appease the gods. Tez needed soldiers to hunt the Danos, as well as a city to host their sacrifices. Both of these things were totally attainable. Even in his limited servant form, Tezcatlipoca is a creator god with authority over a great many things. Like I said earlier, he created his own flesh and blood vessel out of maize, or corn. As a key figure in the Aztec underworld, he can even bring people back from the dead. He also made 4 barrier layers between Mictlan's 9 strata to serve as hellish trials for those seeking Xibalba below. Some of these abilities force him to sacrifice parts of his body, but that doesn't seem to stop him. For instance, the dude's got a part with his own lungs to cause a solar eclipse, which in turn activates his noble phantasm, first son Xibalba. For the sake of a city, he could just build one himself, but chose a more appealing option instead. He summoned his own servant, a pretender class, officially named Tenochtitlan. That's right, he summoned the Aztec capital from proper human history as a heroic spirit. Technically, she's not the city itself, but rather an elemental nature spirit that lived in Lake Texcoco. She then became affiliated with human civilization when the Aztecs built Tenochtitlan atop the lake. In that regard, she's the heart of the city, embodying its will through a humanoid vessel. Back then, the Aztecs used Tenochtitlan to sacrifice 50 people each day in honor of the gods Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. As a servant, she pretends to be both of these 2 gods interchangeably, which is strange considering that the blue Tezcatlipoca is also Huitzil. As Tlaloc, she changes her Saint Graph into a ruler, covering the battlefield in rain. As Huitzil, she becomes a berserker. In either case, her noble phantasm is Ometeotl Tenochtitlan, wherein the city temple transforms into a crazy stone mecha suit. It launches a beam of energy powered by its many human sacrifices. Ironically, one could blame these sacrifices for Tenochtitlan's downfall. Many of the people sacrificed were sourced from surrounding rival tribes, who were more than happy to join Cortez in his assault. Despite this, Tenochtitlan simply wants to be a beautiful, beloved city once more. When Tezcatlipoca summoned her, though, she was tasked with creating a place for sacrifices. The result was what we call Mexico City. So they got the venue, but who was gonna bring in the sacrifices? Better yet, who would lead said warriors? In addition to healing Ort, Daybit wants to effectively control Ort with an order to destroy Chaldeas. For that, they need a divine, willful sacrifice to top it all off. As Tezcatlipoca saw things, why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? According to legend, it wasn't uncommon for people to take on the role of gods, to be worshipped as a particular god's new vessel. Following tradition, Tezcatlipoca decided to create a human that he could shape over time to be his second coming. With some more corn and the loss of a lung, Tez made Iskali, a young man who would, over the course of a year, dedicate himself to becoming a proper divine vessel. For the man's soul, Tez grabbed one from proper human history, specifically Moctezuma II. Yep, the former and final king of the Aztecs was brought back to life for a second go at things. Ideally, Moctezuma's hatred for human history, combined with Tezcatlipoca's divinity, would make for the perfect sacrifice for Ort's awakening. At the same time, Iskali could spend his preparatory year ruling Mexico City and facilitating Dano's sacrifices. It's worth noting that Iskali dresses as a Black Panther, not because he's a Marvel fanboy, but because it emulates Tezcatlipoca's ancient image. Oddly enough, even though his body is brand spanking new, the moment it merges with his soul, it develops a scar where he was stoned to death. All Iskali needed now was an army to command against the Danos. Too bad Camazotz was the only living human, if you could still call him that. There was, however, one other species that could work. Ignoring human ancestors, a completely separate race of ape men evolved in Mictlan. In their short history, they hadn't developed much in the way of society or intelligence, leading the Danos to treat them like they would insects or other primitive life. Tezcatlipoca, however, began to accelerate their development, teaching them how to speak, and more importantly, how to wield guns. These apes, known as the Ocelome, disguised themselves as humans and started hunting the Danos en masse under Iskali's leadership. Even as they were being hunted to extinction, the Danos were low-key impressed, noticing how much the Ocelome's survival instincts drove them to action. By comparison, Danos don't have the same drive or motivation. Now, you might be wondering, where did all these guns come from? We have one feisty minx to thank for that. Koyenskaya, while she was still operating her NFF services, decided to supply Iskali with all sorts of firearms. Even after the sale, Tezcatlipoca would admire and analyze her weapons, creating even more powerful variants. Even though Daybit, Tez, Iskali, and the Oseleme only had 1 year to work with, their knowledge of proper human history quickly rubbed off on the Danos. Some, like Vukub, rejected this foreign influence, but most were delighted to learn about worlds apart from their own. Even the Maya took interest in human culture, specifically how they worshipped gods. As more and more Danos thought to worship the sun as something special, the Maya responded in kind, birthing the Lostbelt's own resident goddess, Kukulkan. Rather than the god from proper human history, this Kukulkan is only modeled after the real deal. Primarily, she remains an agent of the Maya in Mictlan, feeling a strong compulsion to protect the Lostbelt as its king. More importantly, she was born from Mictlan's new sun, and as such, contains Ort's heart. It's fair then to call her Ort Kukulkan, though she's conflicted about the entire concept. After all, the very object that provides Mictlan its sun can also be used to awaken a beast capable of devouring entire planets. Taking some cues from her Aztec form Quetzalcoatl, Ort Kukulkan comes off as cheerful, and she enjoys a good brawl. While she's no luchador, her Mayapan punch can knock other gods into next year, figuratively. She can fly at Mach speed without breaking the sound barrier. By invoking the sun, she can rise tall as a golden giant and clobber invaders. For a time after she was born, she flew around the Danos while naked. Sadly, she's since resorted to wearing human clothing that the Oseleme sell in Mexico City. At least her choice in attire is still hotter than the sun she represents. It's worth noting that Kukulkan is a goddess of the Lostbelt, and not any particular race living on it. Even though the Maya have chosen Danos as the dominant species, she refuses to intervene when the Oseleme come attacking. She did, however, grant the Danos their own king. She also remodeled Chichen Itza to better resemble the one from proper human history. Fascinated, the Danos congregated here to indulge in new cultures. They call their favorite ritual Shokta Paolistli, or Shokta for short. It's pretty much soccer played by a bunch of dinosaurs. Good thing they're not allowed to use their arms, given how short they are. To help facilitate these dino events, Kukulkan went out and found Blue Tezcatlipoca and crowned him king of the dinosaurs. For a god, he's pretty chill, at least when he's not bugging out like Chucky from Child's Play. I haven't seen a face this butt-ugly since Attack on Titan. Oh, and Chichen Itza also plays host to a device called the Solar Sojourn. It's responsible for guiding Mictlan's artificial sun up and down the shaft, creating the cycle of day and night. Eventually, a whole year passes with Daybit and Tez influencing Mictlan's culture. Soon, he'll be able to return to the lowest stratum and sacrifice Iskali to Ord, commencing his plan for destruction. Even if he fails, though, Mictlan's sun is expected to burn out all on its own, spelling the end for the Danos. For the most part, they don't fear their imminent extinction. They haven't had much in the way of personal ambition for hundreds of millions of years. This is the climate Chaldea arrives at, and where the plot finally begins. With that, I think we're due for a quick summary. Just like in proper human history, what we know is the Mayan and Aztec gods are actually alien bacteria, divine filament that landed on Earth with a devastating meteor strike. For the Lostbelt, said meteor wound up impacting Earth 250 million years early. As a result, the meteor's alien bacteria, referred to collectively as the Maya, chose dinosaurs as the dominant species to support. Their blessing made the dinosaurs a more advanced species of Danos. All was well until another meteor, one housing the Lostbelt's version of Ort, impacted Earth 66 million years early as well. The Maya chose to abandon the surface, creating the subterranean world of Mictlan as a safe haven for the Danos. Unfortunately, though, Ort struck down so hard it pierced its way into Mictlan's lower level anyway. Ort stayed asleep for a time, allowing the Danos to thrive for millions of years under Mictlan's artificial sun. Eventually, though, that sun burned out, and Ort woke up to cause havoc. Luckily, a race of humans thrived in the darkness and sacrificed themselves for their king Camazotz to fight Ort. Camazotz gouged out Ort's heart, returning it to sleep in Mictlan's depths, but not before it fused with the Lostbelt's fantasy tree. The Maya, now dependent on Ort to maintain Mictlan, chose to use its heart as a new sun. A year prior to the start of the story, Daybit Semvoid showed up. He's a former clock tower mage who, due to a freak accident with an alien artifact, has been reborn as a cosmic anomaly. Rather than support the alien god, he wants to resurrect Ort and have it destroy proper human history. His servant, Tezcatlipoca, was thrilled to help and went about preparing a system for Ort's revival. He summoned the personification of Tenochtitlan to build Mexico City. He resurrected proper human history's Moctezuma II as Iskali, raising the man into a divine sacrifice. He then guided the Aselame ape men into hunting Danos as even more sacrifices. Inspired by human history, the Danos and Maya began to embrace new ideas. This caused the Lostbelt's king, Kukulkan, to be born from Ort's heart as the Maya's representative. She set up the Danos with their own city and king, but apart from that, watches over Mictlan as it inevitably reaches its end. Not knowing that Daybit's plan is about to come together, Chaldea shows up in the storm border, ready to fight with u-olga Marie, whom they still believe to be the alien god. Hell, she still believes she's the alien god, naive to the greater truth about Chaldeus. After what happened in the British Lostbelt, Ritska and the Chaldea crew decide to summon some companion servants before we set sail. In a way, this comes back to haunt us. For the moment, though, 4 separate servants are summoned, each for their connection to the underworld. At first, only one of them is revealed, our sexy Choco waifu Nitocris. It's been a long time since we last officially saw her in Camelot, so here's a quick refresher. Nitocris was a pharaoh during Egypt's 6th dynasty. Traditionally, the pharaoh is supposed to be a divine ruler, meant to be revered and worshipped. In her time, however, the title had been stained by bloodshed and corruption, with political rivals treating pharaohs like puppet kings for their own motives. To that end, she took up the throne after her beloved brothers were assassinated for not catering to other influential figures. Finding this lack of reverence for the pharaoh unforgivable, Nitocris sought revenge by initially playing along, biding her time, until finally getting the chance to isolate her brother's killers in an underground chamber. For the sake of revenge, she flooded the chamber with water from the Nile River, drowning them all. She then chose to claim her own life without preparing for a pharaoh's typical rebirth after death. You know, stuff like mummification and being buried in a lavish tomb. Spiritually, she was denying herself a proper afterlife, and she did it out of guilt for selfishly using the pharaoh's power. Legend paints Nitocris as a talented necromancer who could command souls of the dead to do her bidding via her mirror of corpses, Anpunebta Jesser. At first, Chaldea is shocked to discover that the Lostbelt's surface is a volcanic wasteland. Before we can realize most of the Lostbelt is now underground, u-olga Marie comes to attack us. It's time for us to use the Hume Barrel Ray-Proof, firing it at Olga the moment she's pushed off the Stormborder's deck. After being blasted with a heavy dose of Excalibur, however, Olga emerges completely unscathed. What the hell? This was our trump card, and now we're screwed. This is quite the revelation, though. The Ray-Proof is a weapon designed to harm enemies based on their threat level to humanity. Does this mean that the essence of Excalibur doesn't perceive Olga as a threat? Olga prepares her counterattack, only to be interrupted when a giant pillar of light rises from Mictlan. It is Kukulkan, burning bright from the sun's rays. Given it's her duty to protect Mictlan, Kuku deems both Olga and the Stormborder invaders, and she literally bitch slaps us out of the sky. Olga is sent flying, and the border takes so much damage that Captain Nemo is severely wounded. He announces an emergency landing, asking Chaldea's staff to take shelter in the shadow border. As we all evacuate, part of the ship breaks open, making a hole in the corridor that Ritska falls through. Alongside one of the generic Nemo Marines, Number 4 to be precise, we plummet to our doom, colliding with the ground somewhere in Upper Mictlan. Mashu jumps out to try and save us, but winds up being separated. Everyone else takes shelter as the storm border crashes deeper into the underworld. For the first time thus far, Ritska actually dies. After years of falling from the sky, I guess it finally did us in. We awaken in the Aztec afterlife, where Tezcatlipoca is there to greet us. Technically, he's our enemy, but he also recognizes us as a worthy fighter. Given our accomplishments thus far, he's willing to bring us back to life in exchange for weapons. Problem is, Ritska doesn't have any conventional weaponry. The most valuable thing in our possession is our set of command spells, but if it means getting a chance to save everyone in the storm border, we're willing to give them up. Naive as it is, Tez nonetheless accepts the trade. Before sending Ritska back to the land of the living, he gives us a sugar skull, a calaveras de azúcar, claiming we might need it. Back in Aztec times, skulls and bones were put on display to honor the dead. Since Tez is so hip and cool with the modern era though, he's opted for the sugar variant used today. Anyway, he sends us back to join the living. It's kind of funny how Mictlan itself is already supposed to be an underworld, so going to see Tez's domain of it is like underworld inception. We wake up inside a cave alongside the lone Nemo Marine, as well as, shockingly, u-olga Marie sleeping on the ground. You might think she's recovering from Kukulkan's beatdown, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Sometime while Ritska wandered the foggy underworld, Tezcatlipoca was busy running an errand for Daybit. Viewing her as a nuisance, Daybit has Tez sneak up on and stab Olga from behind. He then gouges out her heart, leaving her in a severely weakened state. By the time we come to, Olga appears to have repaired her injuries, but it's only cosmetic. She doesn't realize her heart is missing, because it's technically still sending out a pulse. She has no idea that Daybit has secretly stolen her heart and implanted it into his own chest. In a worst-case scenario, he can make himself the final sacrifice to Ort. Not only does this damage weaken Olga, but it also causes her selective amnesia. Thus, when she awakens from her slumber, or activates as you might call it, she's completely forgotten who Ritska is, let alone the fact that they're enemies. All she remembers is that she's the alien invader named u-olga Marie, and she's here to rule over the Earth. It seems her definition of ruling Earth has changed as well. Ignorant of the whole bleached Earth thing, she now just declares she'll act as president of Earth, wanting to lead its people toward happiness. On our side of things, we've wanted to befriend Olga for a while now, hopefully to reunite with the original Olga we thought died at the start of FGO. As a result, u-olga accepts Ritska and the Nemo Marine as her first friends and interstellar goodwill ambassadors. Despite using a human vessel, u-olga Marie operates in a machine-like manner. She can detect mental wavelengths, seeing them as unique colors. Sensing Ritska's distress, she agrees to accompany us as we search for the storm border. At first, Marine 4 is terrified, but soon warms up to her as she protects us in battle. We need all the help we can get, since Ritska lacks command spells. No more summoning shadow servants for a while. Our enemies are a mix of armed Aselame, rogue Danos who have lost their sanity, and other dangerous Mictlan wildlife. Ironically, the all-powerful u-olga is actually afraid of reptiles, and when this renders her useless, we're saved by the Chaldean. Remember this guy? He's the one masquerading as Dr. Roman, being all cryptic about our progress through the Lostbelts. I used to suspect he was some new incarnation of Gaetia, but now I'm not so sure, given all the weird things this story reveals. Bizarrely, Olga is unable to detect any emotional wavelength from the guy. Ritska doesn't appreciate that the Chaldean impersonates Roman's name and appearance. While the Chaldean refuses to change his ways, he does point us in the direction of Mashu. Before leaving us to fend for ourselves, he notes that if we manage to vanquish all 7 Lostbelts, he'll become our enemy. Perhaps the Chaldean, like Daybit, is against Chaldeus and Marisbury's plan. After all, it appears Chaldeus actually wants us to excise the Lostbelts. But at this point, Ritska can only take this as an unclear, ominous warning. Following the guy's advice, we reach a nearby cave where Mashu and Habitrot are staying. Recall that, ever since the British Lost Belt, Habitrot has been Mashu's companion, often residing in the Black Barrel. This cave is actually home to Tepeo, who's been secluding himself to his studies while looking for a way to free Shkik. As one would expect, Mashu is alarmed by seeing Olga, but soon comes to understand their delicate situation. Basically, we want Olga on our side, so we avoid reminding her that she's the alien god we've been fighting against. Inversely, Ritska is surprised to see a talking dinosaur, an herbivore with polite manners at that. Apparently, the Maya learned English by observing Daybit, so it now acts as a translator of sorts. The Danos were always communicating with each other, but only recently have they been learning human language. Typically, at first anyway, Chaldea refrains from admitting their purpose is to destroy Lostbelts. It's not easy telling someone their world isn't the proper course of history, and that the universe has already tried to prune them from existence. Tepeo's an exception, as he already knows the difference between Lostbelts and proper human history. Furthermore, he and his Danos compatriots aren't afraid of going extinct. They just kinda go with the flow, and in Tepeo's case, helping us will give him the chance to learn new things about our world. To reach the border, we'll need to traverse one of 4 trial regions between strata. Since Tepeo's been around the block, he joins us as a guide, not knowing those trial regions have become far more nefarious since he last went through them. I suppose they're technically called underworld boundaries, places where life and death become even less defined. The 4 underworld boundaries are found on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 8th layers of Mictlan. By all estimation, the storm border should have crash-landed somewhere between the 3rd and 5th layers. Them being so close to the Aselame headquarters is dangerous. Along the way, our relationship with u-olga is delicate. We tell her about Chaldea and our exploits so far, which she commends. The tricky part is that we conveniently leave out how she's been the cause of much of our struggles. From afar, we're tailed by Rasputin Kire. Fortunately, he appears to be loyal to Olga, even though she's lost her memories. Rather than spoil our little ruse, he decides to keep helping her, even if that makes him a temporary ally. Nice. Each of the underworld boundaries is named after one part of Mictlan in proper human history. That should give us an idea of what to expect from each one, but when we arrive, things are totally different than expected. At the 2nd layer, what should be a river guarded by a giant iguana is now a massive gorge with no way to cross. We can thank Tezcatlipoca for that. This is also where the other 3 Chaldean servants come in. They more or less scattered when the storm border went down. Being underworld servants from different mythologies, they decided to settle into the underworld boundaries, acting as guardians. We can't do much about that with Ritska's command seals gone. When we traded them with Tezcatlipoca, he went and handed them off to Camazotz of all people. Batman is the last native human of Mictlan, after all. Playing the role of master, Camazotz chooses to go around to each of our servants and use our command spells to force them into alterization. Recall that an altar servant is merely just another aspect of a hero's legend, typically one they repress or deny. Jalter, for instance, forgoes her saintly aspect to instead condemn the church for burning her at the stake. It doesn't necessarily make them evil, but in this case, the 3 servants Camazotz alterizes wind up our enemies at first, deadly serious about making Ritska pass their trials. Managing the 2nd layer, Tlatlauqui, happens to be King Protea, one of the Sakura 5 alter ego servants from the world of Fate Extra. In FGO, she appeared as a bonus boss in the Seraph Singularity, as well as an obstacle during the Las Vegas summer event. Put bluntly, BB is a backup version of Sakura Mato's AI in the Moon Cell. Acting upon her own whims, BB then created the Sakura 5 to serve her. Each of these alter egos contains a section of Sakura's personality blended with a combination of gods. In Protea's case, she's composed of Earth Mother goddesses, including Arvata from Indian mythology. Arvata was a god created when the Devas and Asuras took a world of death and revived it by churning the ocean of milk. Protea appears as a big titan kaiju, but deep down, she's got the heart of a timid young girl. Thanks to a wild miscommunication, we fight King Protea, only for her to finally offer to carry us across the gorge. Along the way, though, she's attacked by Camazots. She gets us part way, but then sinks into the water from multiple slashes to the back. Her domain's water turns blood red from her injuries, and compelled by one of Camazots' command spells, she rises as an altar servant with a green skull mask latched to her face. Essentially, she's been possessed by Xochitonal, the great iguana from mythology. Forced to fight our friend once more, Ritska and the others eventually retreat. Luckily, King Protea can't pursue us beyond the underworld boundary. We may be safe for now, but Ritska worries that King Protea is suffering in this form. In the worst-case scenario, we either let her die from her own wounds or kill her directly. Offering a third solution, Kirei finally makes his presence known. As a priest, he can exorcise Protea by removing her mask. We just need to create an opening for him. Despite some well-earned skepticism, Ritska decides to trust Kirei, hoping he won't do anything to remind Olga of her true identity. Now, Ritska may have given up their right as a master by parting with command spells, but these weird underworld boundaries present a unique opportunity. Ritska traded command spells to return to life, yet while in the underworld, you can't really say they're alive, can you? That effectively nullifies the trade, so long as Ritska stays in one of the 4 underworld boundaries, that is. As long as we have enough mana, we should be able to summon servants. Thus, we return to King Protea, fight her to a standstill, and have Kirei remove her mask. After slaying the disembodied mask, Ritska feels one of their command spells returning. To an extent, it seems it's possible to regain what was lost by thwarting Camazots. With that, King Protea stops attacking us. She's still in her altered state, and gets pissed off that she lost to a human. As thanks for saving her, though, she reverts back into her normal form and brings us the rest of the way across. As this underworld's guardian, though, she can't leave, but does offer to help if an opportunity arises. In the third Mictlan layer, our party tries to pass through, but the Danos there mistake us for a Selime and fight to keep us out. They're under orders from the Dinosaur King of Chichen Itza, so if we want to get by, we'll need permission first. To infiltrate the city without causing suspicion, Kirei offers to use his magecraft to disguise us as Danos. As we go in, u-olga Marie stays behind, and not wanting her to feel lonely, our adorable Marine number 4 stays with her. As they converse, it becomes clear that the Nemo Marines are a convenient, yet sad existence. While they exist as individuals, they synchronize their thoughts to operate like a hive mind. If one of them dies, they can easily be replaced by another. It's very efficient, but human sentimentality can't help but feel sad about individual losses like that. Olga's formed a bond with this particular Nemo, and can't imagine treating other Nemos as the same person. In either case, being just part of a larger servant, number 4 wishes he could be more useful on his own. Inside Chichen Itza, the Danos have established a marketplace, yet have no concept of money. They simply let other Danos take what they need for their travels. Most of them truly have no sense of competition. Even their festive Chaldea tournament is treated as more of a ritual to worship the sun's radiance. We visit the city's altar to see the Dinosaur King, only to be turned away by Priest Vukub. Tepeo reasons it's because Vukub hates him. Thus, the only way we can get an audience with the king is by winning their upcoming Chaldea tournament. In the meantime, we stay at Tepeo's old house in the city. He used to live here before isolating himself in the first layer for his research. To better our chances of winning the tournament, the party splits up to go form other teams, only one of which needs to actually meet the king. Ritska and Mashu pair up to form one team, Olga and Kirei start another, and lastly, Tepeo and Marine group up. That said, when Ritska and Mashu struggle to find other Danos to join, Tepeo suggests his old team, Death Rolling, which consists of 11 Deinonychus brothers. These funny guys love Chaldea, even though they lose all the time. Heck, they don't even have 11 members anymore, which is convenient for us. Still, Mashu's not gonna accept losing, so she channels the training she went through under King Leonidas to whip her new partners into shape. Another part of our preparation for the tournament involves making our own individual Chaldea balls to compete with. While gathering materials, Ritska and Mashu wind up encountering Blue Tezcatlipoca in the jungle. He almost mistakes us for Oseleme, and we have no idea he's the dinosaur king. That night, Ritska discovers u-olga Marie can't sleep. It's not one of her functions as an alien. She then goes all tsundere on us, claiming that even though we can be friends with a common purpose, she is fundamentally a different being. Nonetheless, Ritska suggests trying to sleep anyway, even if it's impossible. Reluctantly, Olga tries, and experiences her first ever dream. In it, she winds up slaying all of the grand servants in quick succession. Overjoyed, she brags about it in the morning. The tournament commences, with Death Rolling scoring their first victory. Tepeo's team, Nautilus of South America, also wins their match. Meanwhile, Olga's been forming a team comprised of any all-star athletes she's already defeated. When it comes time to face us, though, we stomp her ambitions, and she winds up joining us instead. During the intermission between matches, Ritska goes out to grab some supplies from the market and finds Daybit there, prepping for a journey of his own. He humbly explains that Mexico City lacks the stuff he needs, which is why he's here in Chichen Itza. He doesn't treat us like a threat at all, and instead gives us a set of all the tools he himself needs, such as a yellow cucumber for hydration, peppermint bat repellent, and alumite to serve as a makeshift spacesuit. Claiming there's no need for us to fight yet, he takes off, wanting to be more efficient with his time. Conveniently, all of the things Daybit gives us prove essential in reaching the 9th layer. Unaware of this, Ritska just accepts the goods and chooses not to tell anyone else about the encounter. Ritska's team and Tepeo's team are set to duke it out in the finals. Since at least one of them is guaranteed to win either way, Tepeo forfeits the match without consulting Marine number 4. This whole time, though, poor Marine was doing his best to be a good partner by coaching the Danos. This was his chance to be useful, as well as enjoy a game with Tepeo, so news of their forfeiture absolutely devastates him. This pisses Olga off, and she demands Tepeo go and apologize. Surely if he's so intelligent, he can figure out what he did wrong. Humans are driven to strive for goals, no matter the ultimate result. This sort of drive isn't something the Danos naturally possess, yet Tepeo's slowly understanding it, at least on an intellectual level. Everyone else is disappointed that there won't be a final showdown. Nonetheless, Priest Vukub declares us the winner by default and introduces the Dinosaur King. Ritska requests passage across this layer's plains, but then the king notices we're not actually Danos at all. Outraged by this, Vukub orders Chichen Itza's strongest warrior, Wakchan, to attack us. He reluctantly does so, only to admit that he's been wanting to retire and settle down with a mate for a while now. He takes one look at u-olga and immediately falls in love with her horns. Ignoring their difference in species, Wakchan proposes to Olga in front of the entire stadium. She doesn't understand what the hell is happening and pushes her suitor away. The king finds this hilarious and steps forward to speak with us, revealing he's the same boy we met in the jungle. He then clears us of all suspicion by insisting we aren't a Seleme and we mean no harm. The Dino King is willing to grant us the permission we seek, but Vukub believes we and our friends in the Shadow Border are a bad omen that threatens Mictlan itself. While the king does agree, he asks Ritska to show off the Calaveras de Azucar, taking it as proof that Black Tezcatlipoca is having us undergo the underworld's trials. Blue and Black Tez don't seem to be helping each other, but they also stay out of each other's business. The king then challenges Vukub, daring the pterosaur to rebel against him if it's so disagreeable. Vukub shuts his trap for now, but the proposition is foreboding. In a private meeting, Blue Tez asks Olga if she's really trying to help Chaldea, or if she's being blackmailed. As for himself, Blue Tez doesn't think we could harm the Lostbelt anyway. He's taken a liking to the dinosaurs, and only cares about protecting them and Chichen Itza. Even though he's granting us passage, he suspects the Oseleme have already reached our friends at the storm border. Sure enough, that's exactly what happens. While everyone there survived the crash, Nemo took on most of the impact and is severely wounded. Needless to say, the ship can't fly, and communications are down. To keep the crew safe, Gordolf has Kaduk act as Nitocris's interim master. That said, it doesn't help much when Black Tezcatlipoca shows up, wanting to buy the Stormboarder. He enjoys being an arms dealer after all. Representing the crew, Mounier refuses, and Tez shoots him in the heart and then directly in the head. If Tez can't buy the border, he'll just take it by force. Iskali and a squad of Aselame surround the ship, forcing Kaduk and Nitocris to fight back. Nitocris calls the Aselame to her underworld mirror, killing all but Iskali. She announces herself as a Queen of Egypt, the incarnation of the sky god Anubis. Hearing this, Tenochtitlan enters the fray, introducing herself as the god Tlaloc. I'll keep calling her that for now. She insists that an actual god should be able to defeat a mere incarnation. Despite the inherent irony of this statement, the two of them fight, and Tlaloc does in fact win. She leaves Nitocris in a bloodied-up state. Tezcatlipoca plans to rip out Nitocris's heart, but Tlaloc advises he avoid the blood of other mythologies. Refusing to be reprimanded, Tez then shoots Tlaloc, even though she has a point. The two of them are supposed to be siblings, so Iskali is shocked to see such violence. It's just an ordinary bullet though, so Tlaloc will live. In the meantime, Tez orders Iskali to capture Da Vinci, Sion, and Nemo, while Mora Seleme open fire on the remaining crew. Hoping to prevent something like this, Ritska's team rushes to the border, riding atop Wakchan as their guide and porter. We arrive too late, finding the crew dead. Iskali takes advantage of this shocking sight to surround us and take our precious marine hostage. Ritska agrees not to summon any servants if it means saving the marine. Without any reinforcements, the Aseleme king proves strong enough to subdue both Mashu and the weakened Olga. Refusing to hold them back, Marine then tries to escape, only to be shot in the back and killed. This is especially traumatizing to Olga, who knew that while Marine said he could be replaced, she could tell by his brainwaves that he was lying. No matter how unified the Nemo series are, number 4 was irreplaceable from an emotional standpoint. In a fit of rage, she goes all Thanos on Iskali and his men, causing them all to disintegrate. As we look upon the dead border crew, we're surprised to see Gordolf walk out with some other Nemo Marines to greet us. The carnage we witnessed was just a Magecraft illusion meant to stave off more Aseleme attacks. In truth, everyone was saved at the last second by Koyanskaya? Really? She helped them barricade in the border until we arrived. That's great and all, but what about Tunguska? I thought we finally pacified Koyanskaya's wrath. Rather than become a beast, she sequestered herself in her cosmic sanctuary out in space. Well, it turns out if she really wants to, she can still independently manifest herself as a servant. It's a lot like how Merlin was able to help us, even though his real body was still sealed away in Avalon. Despite our past, we did ultimately help Koyanskaya, so she's here in a certain capacity to save us. Plus, it's totally her fault that the Aseleme have weapons in the first place. Apparently, though, manifesting like this shouldn't be possible within a Lostbelt, not without some sort of catalyst to guide her. Turns out, after all this time, Gordolf is still a Koyanskaya simp. Even though she tricked him with her red lipstick before, he could never bring himself to throw it away. It's a good thing it now works in our favor. While Gordolf asks us to trust Koyanskaya, we have the troublesome job of convincing him to trust u-olga Marie and Kire. Regardless of the circumstance, he refuses to accept her and warns us not to get too friendly, as we'll probably wind up fighting the moment she regains her memories. Still, Olga wants to be trusted, and so Kire offers to help Chaldea as a sign of goodwill. Conveniently, beyond all reasonable logic, Mounier isn't completely dead. As Nasu stated in an interview, a magic crest can save a mage even if they're shot in the brain. It also helps they're in a form of underworld, where life and death are more loosely defined. Mounier might be alive on a clinical level, but he'd probably never regain consciousness without Kire stepping in and healing him. With that settled, our next mission is to rescue Da Vinci, Sion, and Nemo before they get sacrificed at Mexico City. Nitocris is still recovering from her defeat, so it's up to Ritska, Mashu, Olga, Kirei, Koyenskaya, and Tepeo to venture through the next underworld barrier. In the fastest time imaginable, Tepeo even learns some magecraft like it were a walk in the park. Chaldea's crew will remain with the Stormborder, as Wakchan has agreed to guard it while they make repairs. You may have noticed that, this entire time, we haven't heard a single peep out of Foe. Turns out, our beloved Furball fled somewhere the moment we started talking about Ort. Dude was all like, "Aw hell nah," and peaced out. Layer 4 is the second underworld boundary, East Taokui, a mountainous region absolutely covered in shards of obsidian. It's absurdly cold. Koyenskaya's got a specially made jacket, but she only has one and refuses to part with it. Tepeo notes he should have procured some honey orchids back in Chichen Itza. Thankfully, 4 honey orchids were part of the loot Daybit gave us. Olga boasts she doesn't need an orchid to stay warm, but feels lonely when she's the only one not to partake. As we traverse the mountains, Camazotz shows up to taunt us. He's sad Marine 4 is gone, as he wanted to drink the little guy's blood. He fights us with a horde of ghosts, but leaves when this underworld's ruler reaches them. Like before, it's another one of our Chaldean servants turned altar by Camazotz's command spell. This time, it's Beni Enma Altar. I'm pretty sure this is the first time she's come up in this series, so let's cover her lore real quick. In Japanese folklore, Beni Enma is known as the Shitakiri Suzume, or tongue-cut sparrow. It's said she reincarnated after a life where she lived in a brothel and died in the mountains. Now she's a kind of oni called a Gokusotsu, the adopted daughter of Enma, the king of hell in Buddhist mythology. For her father, Beni runs a u-olga, or lavish estate abandoned in the mountains. In her case, it's an inn called the Enmate, where she welcomes guests and weighs their sins. She is both compassionate yet also strict when it comes to discipline. She runs a tight ship, from cleanliness to cooking. At one point, she became fascinated with a nearby human village. On a brief visit, Beni was captured by an old lady from the village, who proceeded to slice her tongue in two. She was then saved from captivity by the woman's husband, a kind woodcutter. The original story is meant to be about greed. The woodcutter first rescued a wounded sparrow and nursed it back to health. They were poor and struggled to get by, so the woodcutter's wife grew jealous of the sparrow getting to eat their precious food. The old lady cut Beni's tongue as punishment for eating their stock of starch. To honor the kind woodcutter, Beni has since chosen to support good-natured humans, donning a sword alongside her apron. Ritska first met Beni in a New Year's event, where we had to help repair her inn and clear its debts. Tamamo no Mae, who wants to be a devoted housewife, treats Beni as her demonic cooking instructor, revering her teachings. Even though Koyenskaya isn't actually one of the Tamamo 9, she nonetheless harbors a similar sentiment and hates the idea of having to fight or kill a mentor figure. Plus, she's on the side of most animals. Typically, Beni takes on her childhood form when she was still training to serve the kings of hell. Preying on her desire for the strength she had as an adult, Camazotz made her an altar in exchange for ruling this underworld boundary. More cruel than before, she chooses to weigh Chaldea's sins, sentencing us to wander her domain for an eon of eons. At first, we try to ignore her words, but find ourselves trapped in the mountains with no exit. What was supposed to be a trial we could pass becomes an eternal punishment. If we want that to change, we've got to change Beni Enma herself. This time, Kirei can't help us, because there's no tangible cause of her alterization. Koyenskaya suggests we try to make Beni a child again, but that's easier said than done. Not many Chaldean servants have legends about becoming young. Of course, Gilgamesh once sought an elixir of youth, but Ritska initially writes that off, given how a snake stole that potion. On his own volition, Gilgamesh then reaches out to us, not fully summoned, to boast that even though his first potion was stolen by a snake, he later returned to the underworld to fetch another for his treasury. I mean, I knew that. I'm surprised Ritska didn't. Anyway, Gilgamesh gives us the potion without us needing to summon him outright. Just because we can summon servants in the underworld, that doesn't mean we have the mana to do so. There's an endurance factor to all of this. At the mountain's summit, the party fights Beni Enma once more. Koyenskaya dodges Benny's attacks by riding on a motorcycle. Koyenskaya then ramps off the rocks and lands atop Benny, forcing her to drink the potion mouth to mouth. Who am I to judge her methods? At any rate, the potion turns Benny Enma back into a child, reversing her alterization. She apologizes for all the trouble she caused, and finally allows us to pass through. We also gain back another command spell. Like with Protea, Benny is now stuck here in her part of the underworld, but at least she can now grow up on command without being an enemy. We reach the 5th stratum and infiltrate Mexico City. Kirei can disguise us as the Oseleme, but he can't help us speak their language. The group has no idea that the Oseleme aren't actually human, but rather apes under masks and human clothes. You'd think that all their different grunting sounds would count as a language. I guess it's just not a language humanity's ever documented, and the Maya don't translate it because the Oseleme aren't Mictlan's chosen species. This makes it almost impossible to gather intel. We assume sacrifices probably take place at the city's twin temples, but since our disguises won't fool Tezcatlipoca, we can't get near those temples without a better understanding. Fortunately, Ritsuka and Mashu hear a woman speaking human tongue with a street vendor. They don't know it yet, but this is Kukulkan. Even as an agent of the Maya, she still has a unique self that wants to experience human culture. She wants to buy a jade ornament for her hair, but the vendor won't accept rattlesnakes as payment. They do, however, smell something sweet on Ritsuka and offer to sell the ornament in exchange for the sugar skull. Ritsuka makes the trade, and as thanks, Kukulkan informs us using an alias that our friends will be sacrificed in a special ritual tomorrow. We don't have any time to lose. On the bad side, though, around 100,000 Oseleme guard the temples in anticipation. Thus, our only chance to mount a rescue is right before the ritual, as the temple guards are let off duty to participate. That night, it seems Iskali didn't actually die when Olga went berserk. The game made it look like that, but in truth, his charred remains scattered to the river, and Tlaloc had to pick them out and heal him. We also learn that he's been misled about his role in all of this. He knows Tez and Daybit want to revive Ort and destroy proper human history. What he doesn't know is that this will also destroy Mictlan. Both he and Tlaloc are under the impression that they will emerge as a new humanity who will dominate Mictlan. The sad truth is, after Ort gets loose, there won't be a Mictlan. Inside the temple, Kadak and Sion are put in a cell together, with Da Vinci and Nemo being kept in another. Daybit comes to visit Kadak, insisting Tezcatlipoca is acting on his own, not that there's a problem with it. If anything, had Daybit been in charge, he would have killed everyone rather than take prisoners. Since Tez made the call though, he'll stick with that decision for now. Daybit's kinda surprised Kadak survived so long, given how the other cryptors died in their ambitions. He reminds Kadak that he still has one weapon, his Sirius Light, which is basically a self-destruct mechanism Marisbury made to ensure the cryptors could always complete their missions, even if it meant death. Apparently, Ophelia could have easily killed us back in Scandinavia if only her Sirius Light had fully activated in time. If any of the cryptors tried to bail out of their mission, Beryl Gut was to forcibly detonate them. Clearly, Marisbury didn't have much confidence in Team A. At the very least, Kadak realizes Daybit is telling him he should consider where and when to use his. In the morning, around 2 hours before the ritual, we sneak into the temple, where we believe our friends are being kept. Koyenskaya arrives with intel. 2 of the sacrifices were already brought to the altar at night, with the other 2 remaining in prison. The 2 already up there are Sion and Da Vinci. Thus, we find Kadak and Nemo down below. Nemo still hasn't healed, but Tepeo's able to help speed things along with the spell Nemo Professor had taught him. With them rescued, we split our team in 2. Most of us rush straight to the altar to serve as a diversion, while the second group enters from a different route to free Sion and Da Vinci. Our group fights Iskali in front of his people. The moment he starts to lose, he tries to have the sacrifices killed early to hurt our morale. Once again, though, Koyenskaya comes in clutch, having already saved them. We're just about to retreat with our victory when Tezcatlipoca shows up shooting at us. He takes the fact that Ritsuka gave away the sugar skull to mean they don't want to undergo the trials anymore, so he should just kill them. When Tez spots u-olga, he's surprised to see her alive, commenting how she really is a god. All this time, we've been trying to avoid mentioning the term foreign god, but now that Tez has ruined our attempt, Olga begins to remember some of her lost memories. Namely, she remembers being stabbed by Tez in the cave earlier. Instead of her getting the chance to take revenge, Tez instead orders Tlaloc to be our opponent. To win against Tlaloc's rain and surging waves, Rītska needs to summon servants who can withstand the current, such as floating heroes. When her water proves ineffective, Tlaloc swaps over to Huitzilopochtli. In this state, she's surrounded by a black fog from Tezcatlipoca that prevents us from hurting her. We almost lose, but are joined by Kukulkan at the last moment. She's been meaning to stay out of our affairs, but decides to protect Rītska, revealing herself as the Lostbelt's king. Completely ignoring the fog, Kuku rushes in and clobbers Huitzil, sending her flying into a nearby wall. It seems the Maya are in agreement that Tezcatlipoca needs to be killed. In response, Daybit comes out and orders Tez with a command spell to use his noble phantasm. First Son Xibalba is basically a move that invokes his authority as a creation god. Part of that authority involves being able to peek into the future and manifest what will happen ahead of time. The result is kinda like showing us an illusion of how the future might be. Naturally, the future Tez chooses to show is right in the middle of Ort's invasion, should it be woken up. The entirety of Mexico City is torn to bits, with Oseleme corpses scattered everywhere. This is when Daybit reveals his intent to have Ort break out of the Lostbelt, destroy Chaldeus, and eventually the entire planet. Ort is a planet eater that can easily devour any servants that stand against it. The damn thing literally traces a servant's link back to the Throne of Heroes and plucks them out for consumption. Captain Nemo protects us from an attack, being the first to get gobbled. Losing her composure, Mashu criticizes that what Daybit wants to do is no different than what the alien god is already doing to humanity. Olga hears this and is immediately traumatized. Daybit objects, asserting that between them, at least he's truly willing to admit he's an enemy of humanity. Again, it's quite possible the bleached Earth phenomenon is somehow meant to protect humans, but at some unknown cost Daybit isn't willing to allow. Regardless, we're stuck fighting with Ort, getting a preview of the battle to come. We're pressured to retreat, but then Ort starts heading towards the storm border. Kukulkan realizes how important the border is to us and sets off to protect it on our behalf. She literally picks up the entire ship, with Wakchan and the crew inside, and carries it above her head all the way to Chichen Itza. I'm not sure if that was even necessary, because Tezcatlipoca's illusion reaches its limit, returning everything to how it was before. All the servants Ort gobbled up wind up returning to us as well. That said, if we can't change the future, it'll apparently occur just as shown to us. Before we can truly grasp that, the Oseleme start firing at us, and we escape using a ladder left by Koyanskaya. After getting the chance to witness Tezcatlipoca's desired future, Tlaloc starts to question his motives. She understands he aims to perpetuate warfare, but she doesn't see why her beloved city needs to become a battleground in the process. Unlike Tez, who favors battle itself, she has a clear bias toward the people living in Mexico City. Even so, she convinces herself to follow Tez's plan. Iskali, too, is delusional. Even after seeing his city's destruction, he thinks he'll be able to form his own city in the aftermath. Meanwhile, Camazotz observes this all from afar. He wasn't aware that Tez wanted to resurrect Ort. As a guy who lost his entire kingdom to put Ort to sleep, he's not thrilled about it coming back. At the same time, he doesn't want to side with Chaldea. Instead, he decides he'd rather kill Rītska and take over as humanity's last master. The story then enters an arc of reflection and restoration. Having retreated to Chichen Itza, it's time to make repairs on the storm border and decide our plan of action. Kuku and the Dinosaur King permit us to talk with the Danos about proper human history. In fact, they very much want to hear about our adventures, especially in the previous Lostbelts. Vukub is the only Danos who thinks this is a terrible idea. In exchange for our stories, the Danos offer to help build tools and make repairs. After all that's happened, it's clear that Olga remembers being the alien god, at least to some extent. She avoids Rītska, not wanting to reveal her true identity. She doesn't realize we already knew her identity from the start and have been lying to her for our convenience. Chaldea's staff remains reluctant to trust her. For as much as they want to respect Ritska's feelings, they don't want Olga to ever step inside the storm border. Da Vinci is delighted to meet the Danos in person. Based on her summer event, we already know she loves dinosaurs and finds their more advanced form quite charming. When Cuckoo reveals she used to go around naked, Tapeo, Wakchan, and even Da Vinci ask her to strip back down. Mashu, on the other hand, doesn't want us seeing another naked woman, and cockblocks the whole idea. I find this funny, given I play as a female Ritska. Even with that choice, FGO's story sometimes has Mashu preserve modesty, such as having them sleep in different tents. The manga adaptations ignore that, showing Gudako and Mashu sharing the same bed. At night, the Maya seem to show Ritska a dream about Mictlan's history, though I've long since covered that. The next morning, everyone splits up to complete various tasks. Ritska, Nitocris, and Tapeo venture out to gather supplies. We invite Olga to come along, but instead, she decides to spend the day with Wakchan. It's a date, totally a date. Our hunt goes well enough, but when we next see Wakchan, he's totally miserable. During their outing, Wakchan did his best to cheer Olga up, but she's too afraid that everyone will figure out she's a monster. She can't appreciate the view Wakchan shows her, not when she considered it her duty to destroy such beauty. Insecure about this, she lashes out at Wakchan, insulting him and his species. After that, she feels too embarrassed to apologize. To procure some obsidian, we return to Beni Enma's domain, and Cuckoo retrieves an entire mountain for us. Kaduk catches Kirei snooping around the storm border, inquiring about its ability to harness external energy in an emergency. Mega suspicious. Though Kirei admits it would be wise to be suspicious of him. Still, he insists he won't do anything to provoke Olga's memories. He does, however, want to see the birth of one nearing emergence. I assume he's talking about Ort. Well, it's pretty clear from Heaven's Feel that Kirei is an anti-abortionist, even when a child is as dangerous as Angra Mainyu. In fact, the more screwed up the birth, the more excited he is to witness it. On another day, we plan to set up some hydroelectric power by building a generator at King Protea's domain. By this point, she's cast aside her kind, innocent self to be all edgy and defiant as an altar. She only complies with our construction plans after Cuckoo kicks her ass. For as great as that is, Kukulkan only sticks around to help us for a bit. Eventually, the Dinosaur King reminds her she needs to convene with the Maya's collective will and stop acting on her own. Similarly, we get a note from Olga that she and Kirei won't be accompanying us anymore. She hoped she could fool herself into being the naive Olga she was before, but after meeting Ritska in the street at night, she realizes how impossible that is. The next day, the storm border gets attacked by a group of feral Danos who've been turned into vampires. It's Kamazotz's doing, and hoping to retrieve Ritska's final command spell, the party tracks him to a forest northwest of Chichen Itza. We arrive at the ancient ruins of Khan, where Kamazotz greets us by conjuring his deceased people as undead familiars. Without Cuckoo's help, we don't have the manpower to fight back. That said, Nitocris is back at the border, and if we can get her help, it'll become a necromancer duel. Not wanting Kamazotz to escape, Tapeo offers to stay behind and let the ghost warriors beat up on him. He may be a pacifist, but his defensive power's off the charts, thanks to the electromagnetic field Danos have around their bodies. Excited to prove herself after losing to Tlaloc, Nitocris comes back and easily vanquishes Kamazotz's spirits with her own. Witnessing this sets Kamazotz into a rage. He grabs hold of Nitocris and asks if she knows the names of each and every one of her ghosts. She answers yes, as they were all her former subjects. This hits a nerve, as Kamazotz feels bad all his people needed to sacrifice themselves to make him immortal. He avoids carrying the guilt from this by forgetting about it, and finds it insulting that a fellow king of the dead would be so familiar with the deceased. Disgusted by Nitocris, he rage quits, flying deeper into Mictlan. We don't get our command spell back, but at least now the Danos won't have to be afraid of Kamazotz while trying to help us. She may not have actually killed Camazotz, but the Danos are impressed enough to celebrate her chasing him away. Finally, she shows a bit of courage and pride rather than hiding under her Medjed cloak. In the morning, Chaldea prepares to send a squad after Daybit, hoping to kill him before he can reach Ort. Unfortunately though, we don't know for sure where Ort even is. Kukulkan returns from her temple and suggests we seek answers from Shkik and Mictlan, the seventh layer. Kadak and Gordolf stay behind to research anything they can about Daybit. Hearing that Olga's not around anymore, Wakchan offers to transport the assault team to the 6th stratum, where we'll need to undergo another trial at the 3rd underworld boundary, Shoshoaokwi. While we're gone, an angry Vukub is convinced Kukulkan and the Dinosaur King don't really care about protecting Chichen Itza. Ironically, he chooses to oppose them by striking a deal with Iskali. If you can't beat him, join him, I suppose. The 3rd underworld boundary is a land of floating islands. Unlike Beni Enma's turf, this place is hot as balls. Some of these distant islands have oases, but to reach them, you have to risk some crazy whirlwinds that blow through. If only we had something to fight against heatstroke. Oh wait, we do. Part of Daybit's gift contained yellow cucumbers, which have a long-lasting cooling effect. So far, nobody questions why Ritska just so happens to have everything needed to cross these boundaries. Normally, we've been able to summon servants easily within the boundaries, but something about this one is stopping us. At the same time, we're attacked by a giant creature, or rather, its disembodied leg. Ritska recognizes this leg as belonging to Gugulana, the bull of heaven from Mesopotamian myth. Typically, Gugulana is associated with the goddess Ishtar, but in this case, it's actually here on behalf of Ereshkigal. Makes sense she's another of the Chaldean servants we tried to bring along, given she's a goddess of the underworld. Again, it's been a while since Babylonia, so let's go over some key parts of her lore real quick. Ereshkigal was born to be a guardian of Kur, the Sumerian underworld. It was a lonely job, given she would never get to see the surface. She envied her rival Ishtar, who could freely soar the skies above. In myth, she supposedly married Nergal, a sun god among other things. In fate, though, that's not the case. Instead, Ereshkigal only sought Nergal's authority to improve her domain. Nergal then tricked her by giving her unwanted authorities over disease and plagues. In contrast, Ishtar is a goddess of fertility. Famously, Ishtar once descended into Kur, rendering herself vulnerable in the process. Ereshkigal slaughtered Ishtar down there, effectively trapping her and depriving the surface of its fertile crops. Like a douchebag, Ishtar's husband Dumazid celebrated her death, seeing it as a chance to be Uruk's sole patron deity. This came back to bite him when Ishtar was resurrected by the god Enki. According to underworld law, for Ishtar to leave, somebody would have to take her place. Ereshkigal saw Dumazid celebrating his wife's death and chose him to occupy the underworld in her stead. Ever since, this gold sheep has had to spend half his time stuck beneath the earth with Ereshkigal. She's here in the Lostbelt because we summoned her to help us, and in a roundabout way, that's what she tries to do. For some reason, she was also summoned alongside Dumazid. I guess he's forced to be her sidekick so long as she has underworld authority. At first, she had him decorate this boundary with flowers, but then Camazotz came around and tried to make her an altar servant. Perhaps tempted to be truer to herself, like Ishtar, she willingly accepted, becoming Ereshkigal Altar. It definitely made her stronger and more assertive, which would help us out if it didn't also make her our enemy. Changing her name to Ninkigal, she wiped out all those beautiful flowers and replaced them with a thunder temple surrounded by storms. Now, if we want to pass the trial, we've got to knock some sense into her. As for Gugulana, well, apparently, Ereshkigal's first husband was named Gugulana, and scholars have at times assumed him to be the same guy as the Bull of Heaven Ishtar called upon. Either Eresh got down and dirty with a massive animal, or the coincidental name has allowed her to summon the bull, even when she never could in life. Dumazid's been butthurt since Ereshkigal went altar, so he's been keeping his distance, gathering all the mana he used for those flowers she destroyed. We meet him first, but it's not long before Ninkigal herself shows up, declaring Chaldea her eternal slaves. Using a swarm of disembodied Google-ana legs, she attacks us and takes Nitocris, Tepeo, Mashu, and Da Vinci prisoner. Ritska and Kukulkan, however, manage to escape and take shelter with Doomzid. Ironically, Ereshkigal lectures Nitocris in jail about doing what it takes to protect the human order. Basically, Eresh thinks Nito is holding back and could become a total underworld badass if only she embraced alterization. That's rich coming from someone who's our enemy. It's probably a lot like BB, who always appears as a bad guy, but is ultimately trying to do good in a roundabout way. At the same time, Ritska points out how Cuckoo's holding herself back. Kukulkan could have smashed those Google-ana legs rather easily with a noble phantasm, but she didn't because she's not sure Chaldea will trust her as a Lostbelt king. If she were to use her noble phantasm, Kinich Ahau Impact, we'd learn she was the same golden giant that smacked the Stormborder out of the sky. Regardless, Ritska convinces her to go all out, and they even establish a master-servant bond, kinda. Ritska's technically not a master till they get their command spells back, so it's more symbolic than practical. Fans joke about how we're giving Cuckoo a mana transfer, and for as much as I'd want to see that, it's just not what you're thinking. Turning Ereshkigal back to normal proves rather simple. Her alter form is a vision of her ideal self, and if Cuckoo can defeat that ideal self, she'll realize it's not quite as ideal as she thought. In other words, we've gotta humble her. Donning an outfit more akin to a spacesuit, Cuckoo smashes through not only the Google-ana legs, but Ereshkigal's confidence. This seals our victory, but it also exposes Cuckoo's earlier attack on us. To be fair, if she hadn't intervened, Olga would have probably destroyed us anyway. That, and as the Lostbelt King, we appeared to her as hostile invaders. You can't blame her for getting protective. Thus, we forgive her, and all's well that ends well. Even though we had to fight her, Ereshkigal insists that this was for the best, as she now has a stronger spirit origin. She can't come with us, but she's confident her newfound strength will eventually come in handy. Past her, we reach the 7th layer and find the Mictlan observatory where Shkik resides. She explains a lot to us, such as her previous encounter with Daybit and how the sun will soon burn out no matter what we do. Through a practice called the Popol ritual, we enter a trance-like state where we can vicariously experience what Daybit was up to during the past year. Da Vinci tries to formulate a timeline for the Lost Belt, but gets certain details wrong. Without Sherlock to correct her, she's prone to making mistakes. Not like these circumstances are conventional by any means. After being enlightened on much of the lore I covered earlier, the party takes a break. Nitocris takes this chance to ask Shkik how she can become an altar servant, and is told she'll need to toss aside something precious to her. With all that information, our goal is now clearer. We have to stop Daybit and Tezcatlipoca from reaching Ort in the 9th stratum. We only have a little time before the poisonous cosmic rays die down, granting access to Ort's tomb. That night, with illusions of grandeur, Vukub meets with Iskali. Believing himself worthy of being the Danos' king, he strikes a deal with the enemy. Under the impression that Iskali can save Mictlan's son, Vukub offers them easy access to Chichen Itza, its solar sojourn, and the Stormborder by giving false orders to the city guards. This dumbass dino's willing to do this, even when Iskali clarifies he plans to storm Chichen Itza, destroy it, and slaughter everyone inside. While u-olga Marie and Kirei have decided not to travel with Ritska, they haven't actually ditched the Lost Belt yet. They've been hanging out at Tepeo's home on the 1st stratum. Given the circumstances, Olga reasons she needs to prevent Ort's rampage before she can fuse with it. That said, she's still confused about the full extent of her identity, as are we. Suddenly, she detects the Oselame marching toward Chichen Itza. Still wanting to play hero, she insists on helping protect the city, given how it's been hospitable to her. Still, that doesn't stop the city from becoming a bloody war zone. It takes around 30 Oselame to take down a single Danos, and that's with the Danos barely fighting back. Iskali finds this his final chance to prove himself worthy of Tezcatlipoca's legacy, referring to this battle as Shochi Yaoyotl. Feeling responsible for this bloodshed, Koyanskaya takes to the streets to defend the Danos. However, Tezcatlipoca doesn't take kindly to this betrayal, and the results are brutal. She's utterly defeated, bloodied, and battered. Wakchan faces an existential crisis as he fights his way toward the shrine. Following a faint survivalist instinct, he questions why he's putting up a resistance. In either case, his bravery is rewarded when u-olga joins him in helping the Dainos evacuate. Ritska, Mashu, and Kukulkan wind up battling Tezcatlipoca in the city, while Nitocris and Da Vinci have a rematch with Tlaloc by the border. The border's crew help out by launching torpedoes coated in Quetzalcoatl's authority. This is because Quetz supposedly defeated Tlaloc in legend. However, these attacks don't harm her, making it pretty clear this Tlaloc isn't actually a genuine god. Even so, she's too strong, but just before she can reach the border, she's horrifically attacked by Camazots. Like, he dices her into itty-bitty pieces. Surprisingly, this doesn't kill her, but it does stop her from revealing her true identity as Tenochtitlan. Doing so would have stolen Camazots' spotlight, so he took her out of the picture for a while. He then declares he'll be waiting at Mictlan's 8th lair for a proper fight. During our battle with Tezcatlipoca, Mashu senses he's able to swap spirit origins on the fly. In this case, he's gone from Black Tez to the Red One. He could even become the White One, if only he didn't completely hate Quetzalcoatl. We notice that Kukulkan has fled somewhere else. Why isn't she helping us? Tez tries to convince us that Kuku is actually a rather cool and cold-hearted goddess. She won't interfere in a fight between Oseleme and Dainos, as the Maya only care about the Lostbelt's survival overall. Ritska naively insists this can't be true. For a brief moment, u-olga Marie shows up to help instead. She wants to honor our friendship, but that changes the moment Tez reveals Ritska and Mashu have known all along she's the alien god. Embarrassed by their deceit, Olga then flies off. Tezcatlipoca shames us for manipulating her, and he's kinda got a point. He's just stalling for time, though. To prove himself, Iskali has been tasked with killing the dinosaur king, except he doesn't realize that the king is actually another Tezcatlipoca. This presents a moral dilemma. How can he obey Tezcatlipoca by killing another? He tries to resolve this by asking if the dinosaur king is siding with the Lostbelt or with proper human history. He assumes that since the king has aided Chaldea, he must be on humanity's side. Instead, Chucky here asserts it's the exact opposite. He may have been summoned by a human, but he's very much chosen to support the Dainos. He only aids Chaldea when they aren't a threat. Instead, it's the Black Tez who's obsessed with proper human history. Why else would he build Mexico City and embrace modern weaponry? Confronted by the fact that his idol may not actually care about Mictlan at all, Iskali chooses to reject reality and open fire on the dinosaur king. Naively supporting Black Tez, he orders the remaining 16 Oseleme to take the Solar Sojourn to Mexico City. Keep in mind that he entered with a force of 2,000. Even in the dark of night, inspecting the Oseleme corpses reveals them to be ape men. All this time, neither Chaldea nor the Dainos had any clue. For his treachery, the 61 surviving Dainos bind Vukub in chains. They don't resent him, though. In a cruel way, he was trying to show how much more the Oseleme actually care about survival, how they're fighting to stop the Lostbelt from being pruned. Most Dainos, on the other hand, are just accepting in the face of extinction. Even after what just happened, the surviving Dainos still gather at the shrine to hear more stories from Ritska and Mashu. The Maya aren't concerned by this. Instead, they wish to keep everyone out of the 9th stratum. Kukulkan knows this is essentially an order to slay Chaldea if they go too far. She clearly doesn't want to, but it's her job. In the aftermath, Ritska and the Chaldean crew regain their footing. Regardless of the tragedy that just occurred, they still have work to do. Koyanskaya is still alive, but it'll take her some time to recover. Even after all our repairs, the storm border is still 10 hours away from being ready. Access to Ort's tomb will come before that, so we need to prioritize stopping Daybit. Once again, we split up. Ritska's team is sent straight to the bottom, while a second team consisting of Kaduk, Gordolf, and Koyanskaya will attack Daybit from the shadow border. That second group chooses to ambush Daybit in the desert. I'm not sure why he wasn't just waiting right outside the closest stratum. Anyway, Daybit, Iskali, and Tezcatlipoca are driving along in a jeep when suddenly, explosions go off from underground. Kaduk and Koyenskaya have laid a number of traps. Using only what he learned from action movies as a kid, Daybit somehow steers them to safety. Even further ahead, Koyenskaya emerges from a sandstorm. For this fight, Kaduk and Gordolf channeled their mana to ascend her as the goddess of weaponry, Iksa Utsuwa no Omikami. To take her on, Daybit stays behind, letting Tez and Iskali proceed. On his own, Daybit tries ramming Koyenskaya with the jeep. It seems reckless, but she has no idea what he's truly capable of. Meanwhile, Wakchan offers Ritsuka's group a ride across Mictlan, and Tepeo joins as our guide. Though the path to Xibalba is clear, we still have to traverse the 8th layer, Yayaokui, the final underworld boundary, as well as Kamizotz's turf. Yet again, Daybit's gifts come in handy. Even at a lower concentration, these layers are still bathed in Ort's cosmic rays. It's fine for servants, but dangerous for humans. That's what the Alumite raincoats are for. The moment Mashu hears this, she slaps that sucker on Ritsuka in less than a second. Ain't no one getting cancer here. Our bat repellent seems to work on a lot of the small fry, but does nothing to stop Kamizotz from comedically sneaking up behind us. For as much as he wants to drink Ritsuka's blood, he offers to reveal to us a shortcut if we give up Nitocris. Dude's so pissed about what happened in Khan that he's willing to prioritize her over us. Naturally, we refuse, so once again, Kamizotz goes into rage mode. Not sure exactly when, but somewhere along the line, Kamizotz gained the qualifications needed to ascend as a beast of humanity. With Gaetia gone, he takes over the role of Beast 1, transforming into a more fiendish bat monster. During the fight, we all get swarmed by other bats, and by the time Habitrot can scare them off with the Black Barrel, both Kamizotz and Nitocris have disappeared. Taken to Kamizotz's lair, Nitocris is interrogated as to why she denied herself an afterlife. Specifically, he seems irked about how she chose to bear the weight of her sins. After all, he's found it more tolerable to simply forget his past, to ignore all the people who sacrificed themselves to make him immortal. Clearly disagreeing with each other, Kamizotz bets that Chaldea won't even come to rescue her. If they flee, Nitocris will become his, but if they show, he'll make her this underworld's queen. It's honestly a pretty stupid bet, given that no good master would ever abandon their favorite Choco Bunny. Thus, we quickly arrive and resume our battle. Nitocris notices we won't win, since Kamizotz's immortality is maintained by his refusal to remember the past. She thinks back to her own actions. After she took revenge for her brothers, she took her own life to atone for tainting the good pharaoh's title through underhanded means. Instead of preparing her afterlife, she instead prioritized her heart, refusing to be judged on a divine level. She now realizes that, if she wants to attain new power as an altar servant, she must sacrifice the heart she so desperately tried to protect. In a brutal yet beautiful act, she gouges out her heart and offers it up to her divine Anubis for judgment. She becomes a pharaoh who embraces her lust for vengeance without shame. Nitocris' altar then makes do on Kamizotz's bed. As the new queen of Yayaokui, she forbids anyone from forgetting anything. Because of this, the Batman can no longer hide from his past, and through death, he can atone for his guilt. We kick his ass, but right before the battle is nearly done, Nitocris runs out of mana, reverting to her normal state. Channeling Anubis costs a lot. She falls to the ground, about to plunge into the cursed ravine below, but Kamizotz rescues her, tossing her out of harm's way. He finds solace in having finally remembered what he lost. As such, he lets himself fall into the ravine, dying in the process. After waking up, Nitocris then joins us as we venture deeper. At the bottom of the 9th layer, we find a temple surrounded by lava. The path down is built for humanoids, so Wakchan decides to wait at the top. The 8th layer took us 4 hours to breach, which was enough time for Tezcatlipoca and Iskali to beat us to the punch. We try to confront them, but are intercepted by Tlaloc. Despite the beating Kamizotz gave her, she's still determined to keep fighting. She's stronger here in Aztlan, the place where she was first summoned. Even so, Nitocris takes this chance to settle the score. She's figured out that Tlaloc is only impersonating the gods, forcing Tlaloc to announce herself as Tenochtitlan. Nitocris then removes her heart once more to fight as Nitocris' altar. In her final stand, she defeats Tenochtitlan, but doesn't go in for the kill. Instead, her transformation causes her spirit origin to collapse. It makes sense that tearing one's own heart out would lead to death. The only reason Nitocris survived the first time was because she was in an underworld boundary, her own for that matter. She should have stayed there, but put herself at risk to continue protecting us. Before vanishing, Nitocris tells Tenochtitlan that she should fight for what she truly wants, the people of her beloved city. Suddenly, the ground shatters from below, sending us plummeting deeper in. By the remains of Mictlan's fantasy tree Quasar is a gaping hole leading to Ort's heart. Here, Iskali learns he is to be the final sacrifice. His malice for proper human history will serve as a command for Ort when it awakens. He's about to comply when a giant arm from Tenochtitlan's noble phantasm crashes in from above, protecting Ritska's group from the dangerous fall. Iskali's surprised to see her helping the enemy. He insists on being the one to kill us, but let's be real, he never stood a chance. Even though he loses, all he has to do is yeet himself down the pit, and Ort will be revived. At the very last moment, though, he decides he can't go through with it. For as much as he wants to destroy proper human history, he doesn't want to destroy the entire planet. Tezcatlipoca actually accepts this, allowing Iskali to step down. That doesn't mean he'll let Iskali live, though. With a bullet between the eyes, the Oseleme king hits the ground dead. Apparently, his year-old body would have perished before long anyway. We fight Tezcatlipoca, but don't make any headway due to his black smoke. That's when u-olga and Kirei make their move. She keeps running off, but in the end comes back when it's most important. Ritska apologizes, and Olga accepts their friendship. Her lightning disperses the smoke, letting us kick Tez's ass. He vanishes before being able to revive Ort. Hooray! Overly confident, Da Vinci declares the fight is over. With no more divine hearts to sacrifice, the final step in waking Ort can't be completed. Daybit has other plans, though. He shows up looking no worse for wear. He and his Dark Star familiars were plenty capable of thwarting Koyanskaya. He shows us he means business, opening his jacket to reveal u-olga's heart beating in his own chest. If he himself jumps down the hole, Ort will still be revived. We fight to stop this, but are too little too late. As Ort begins to stir, its tendrils nab Olga, treating her as part of its own body. She's about to be absorbed like what we saw with Nemo earlier. When everyone assumes the worst and gives up on her, Wak-chan comes running in. Our Dino Chad chews through the tendrils, rescuing Olga while being exposed to lethal amounts of radiation. Despite being rejected, he's still proud to have met her, dying peacefully. This really confuses u-olga. She can't believe someone would care about her like that. She recounts knowing firsthand of humanity's evils. For decades, she was dissected by humans, even as she screamed that she was a person and was on their side. This twist implies that u-olga Marie isn't actually the alien god, but rather Specimen E. She never responded to Specimen E's cries, she was the one making them. How that all fits together is unclear at this point. She keeps these thoughts to herself, so that Ritska and Mashu never pick up on it. Given how Ort now has her heart, Kirei assumes that even if Olga were to fuse with Ort now, she wouldn't be the one in control. Not wanting to watch as Earthlings are massacred, she and Kirei instead evacuate. This leaves us fending for ourselves in a precarious location. Ort launches a web of metallic threads, trapping us in, but luckily, Kukulkan decides to save our sorry asses. She would have come sooner, but was busy enjoying tea with Kadak and Gordolf in the Shadow Border. You see, she saved the two of them from Daybit's familiars. Confiding in Ritska's judgment, Kadak and Gordolf humbly thanked Cuckoo and offered her tea as a sign of goodwill. She's been talking a tough game so far, but right now, she ignores her orders and prioritizes stopping Ort first. After taking a crack at it, though, she starts to understand that Ort is a part of her. As a reminder, she's born from the sun that the Maya made using Ort's heart. Tepeo almost figures this out, causing Cuckoo to flee in embarrassment. So much for that. I mean, she's cute and all, but hella inconsistent. Outside the temple, Ort continues its revival. We watch as it projects a reality marble, covering Mictlan in copies of the fantasy tree. Along with the trees come those annoying seeds of emptiness, too. Gordolf and Kadok reach us, and we hop on the storm border to keep up with Ort. Fighting the damn thing is a whole other hassle. Our only hope is to use Mictlan's status as an underworld to our advantage. We'll reenact our fight with Gaetia at the Temple of Time. By that, I mean we need to summon a metric fuck-ton of heroic spirits. Call on everyone recorded in Chaldea's memory. If Ort's gonna keep absorbing all our servants, then we'll just keep summoning more. We go all out, suspecting that when Ort finally dies, all the servants it gobbled will come back to us. Everyone else, including the storm border, which has finally been fixed, set out to keep the seeds of emptiness at bay. Ort is on a direct path toward Mexico City where the sun is stationed. It wants its heart back, and if we let it get that far, it'll become too strong for us to keep fighting. Eventually, the stupid spider reaches the 7th stratum, and there's nothing we can do to save Shkik, since she can't leave her observatory. The whole thing gets plowed through, leaving nothing behind. Well, it's time for our trials at the underworld boundaries to finally mean something. Ereshkigal, who presides over the 6th stratum, can help slow Ort down by lining the path with thousands of Gugalana legs. Tapping into all the mana Doomzid salvaged from her flowers, she does everything she can to assist us. For a moment, it seems like we finally kill the damn thing, misjudging that its main body is the UFO in back. It's what's called a galactic supercell. No longer relying on its legs, Ort retaliates by launching a deadly solar storm. Ereshkigal and Doomzid fight to the very end, but ultimately fail to stop Ort. As such, it's back to summoning servants. Soon, the Oselame of Mexico City can see Ort coming. They arm themselves for a fight to the death, which Vukub is shocked by. He's already escaped from Chichen Itza. He was promised a position of priesthood with the Oselame, but now here they are going off to die. Taking the hint, he decides to help for once, grabbing the Solar Sojourn and flying it out to Chichen Itza. While it's a nice thought, Vukub isn't fast enough to outrun Ort's pace. He needs someone to slow Ort down. It's a good thing, then, that Nitocris never killed Tenochtitlan. After seeing Iskali stand up to Tezcatlipoca, she too wants to oppose this outrageous plan. All she's ever truly wanted was to protect her people. To do so, she activates her noble phantasm, using what little strength she has to restrain Ort. When her arms shatter and she nearly gives up, the sight of Oselame still putting up the good fight inspires her to keep pushing. Together, they force Ort to change course, sparing half the city. Even though it's still in shambles, Tenochtitlan is glad she did the right thing and disappears without regret. Thanks to her effort, Chaldea can now use Beni Enma's territory as another foothold. Determined to make this our final stand, even King Protea comes to back us up. I guess she's able to leave her own boundary, if it's to visit another. Together, Protea and Beni plan to subdue Ort. King Protea uses the Ocean of Milk to weaken it and grab hold of it. While it can't spin, Beni Enma slices into it with a nifty technique she learned from King Hassan. You know, the one that forces the concept of death onto someone immortal. Granted, this is something she can only do in the underworld. It's not enough to slay Ort entirely, but if we can destroy most of its outer shell, a blast from the Storm Border's main cannon should do the trick. All of this seems hopeless. Those seeds of emptiness have wiped out 98% of all life in Mictlan. Only a few Danos remain in Chichen Itza. Still, even with what's left, they can make a difference. Blue Tezcatlipoca, the king of dinosaurs, winds up healing from his injuries. I suppose if the bad guys get to revive, the good ones should too. It's only fair. He gives a rousing speech to the remaining Danos. He knows they don't really worry about extinction, that they don't have the same survival instinct the Oselame do. But since everything is going to end anyway, they might as well try something crazy. Even if their world comes to an end, they can do something to help proper human history, which they've all been so fascinated by. To everyone's surprise, the remaining Danos take their cute little arms and stock up on firearms. It's awesome. Tepeo decides to join his kin, marching to battle with a knife. At first, Mashu laments his decision, but accepts when he explains how he was unable to save Shkik, and now wants to do something meaningful. Silly dude, you've been meaningful this whole time. Nasu is really vague about this, but it's confirmed through an interview that Tepeo winds up reconciling with Vakub, who flies him up to Ort. Like a streak of lightning, Tepeo soars across the sky, shaving off one of Ort's lives with the mystic eyes of death perception. For as cool as that is, I can't help but laugh at the phrase, one of its lives. Nasu can just write that kind of logic whenever it's convenient. Anyway, Ort retaliates by tearing off Tepeo's limbs. He and the other wounded Danos are stuck rotting in the wasteland, waiting for their time to end. Ort continues its charge, but now the Stormborder is ready to fire. According to Trismegistus, our blast won't be effective unless Ort is within 10 kilometers. If Ort has an attack that can hit us from further away, we're screwed. Of course, it does, launching metal tentacles that stretch double the distance. The border's shields won't hold out for long, but thankfully, there's another surprise in our favor. The Dainonicus brothers, our little raptor friends from the Shokta tournament, have been working under Koyanskaya's orders to construct a tank. It's called the Type 79 Istula 7-Drive Mark Mictlan, and it launches homing attacks that intercept Ort's tentacles. The exact moment Ort enters range, we fire the main cannon, but our shot is blocked by a concentrated solar storm. Technically, it only altered our shot's trajectory, so if we make better calculations, a second shot can compensate. Unfortunately, the next shot will take 2 minutes to charge, and we can't afford that. That's when Kirei, the sneaky bastard he is, just kinda shows up on the border to offer a proposal. U-olga Marie has what's called the Tachyon Jail Authority, which can stop time, or rather, move us so fast it's like time is stopped. This can buy us the time we need to recharge, as well as slow Ort's regeneration to a point where we can actually win. In exchange, Kirei asks that he and Olga earn the right to use Chaldea's ray-proof beam. Recall when Kirei was snooping around the border way back? Well, he secretly modified its charging system so that it could be fueled from outside mana. I'm pretty sure this would have been used to kill us if we tried to flee, but now it's become hella useful. We accept, with Ritsuka and Mashu stepping out onto the deck for one last battle. Or so we think. Afterward, Olga insists we watch as she activates the ray-proof. She won't say it, but she plans to sacrifice herself to make this work. In her final moment, she inquires about the original Olga, Chaldea's director. In a way, she admires the idea of being that other Olga, and lets loose the anticipated Excaliblast. Both u-olga and Ort are completely disintegrated. She was destroying her own heart after all. It's sad, but in the end, Olga really did protect the Earth as she proclaimed. Or did she? Nah, I take it back. Ort's not a spider. More like a cockroach that just won't die even after a nuclear apocalypse. In the most ridiculous ass pull ever, Ort is so dedicated to survive that it speedruns a copy of human history and simulates 140 million years to create a timeline where it becomes a legend recorded in the Throne of Heroes. It then summons itself as a heroic spirit, and not just any heroic spirit, but a grand foreigner. Jesus H. Christ. At this point, it's pretty clear we never really stood a chance. Thankfully though, our long and arduous fight has finally convinced Kukulkan to step up and do what she should have done ages ago. Essentially, only Ort can kill Ort, and the only other Ort around is her. She ascends as Sun God Kukulkan, protecting the border from Ort's solar storm. She was planning on staying back, but since Tepeo wound up being one of the last Danos still alive, she decided to humor his dying wish. That wish was to see her finally act of her own accord, to appear so dazzling it would blow his friggin' mind. Even at the brink of extinction, she can become the Danos' one and only legend. Thus, Kukulkan helps us kick Ort's ass yet again, forcing it to turn into a new star cell form. Ritsuka's just about had it with this bullshit, but Kuku assures us they can win. She gathers the Maya's consensus that proper human history has shown that there's a different way of living. For 66 million years, the Danos thrived without actually progressing as a species. It's why their world was meant to be pruned in the first place. Thus, Mictlan will end so that humanity can move on. With one epic blast, Kukulkan detonates the sun, incinerating Ort and the entire sea of fantasy trees. From afar, Tepeo watches this spectacle for the last 10 seconds before dying. Koyanskaya starts to disappear, satisfied with what she's contributed. The Dainonicus brothers spend their final moments playing a Shokta match. Cuckoo, having finally ended the Lost Belt herself, wants to observe its last moments. She does wonder, though, now that she's been truly seen as a god, whether Chaldea can summon her later on. Of course we can, and of course we will. As the border is drawn to Mictlan's surface, Ritska suddenly passes out. Turns out, we have one last unresolved task. We find ourselves in Mictlampa, Tezcatlipoca's realm of the underworld. Even though we've got our command spells back, we don't technically have our right as a master back, apparently. Rather than give that right back to us, Tez insists we fight for it. Daybit died, sure, but as we've seen many times now, death in Mictlan isn't definitive. Ritska can get their rights back, but only after defeating Daybit in a master duel. Should we lose, Tez can still bring Daybit back to life, possibly even forcing us to defeat Ort all over again. What an OP bastard! I mean it too, since this battle is a pain in the ass. If you watch my livestream, you can see me rage like a damn child. Anyway, when Ritska wins, they effectively complete their underworld trials and are brought back to life. Daybit accepts this loss, urging us to discover the truth about Chaldeus. Marsbury may have been trying to save humanity, but Daybit claims he was trying to save the universe. Perhaps one day we'll be able to understand what he meant by that. With Lostbelt 7 finally excised, we've got a lot of thinking to do. Luckily, our Chaldean crew is optimistic about the future. To crank up the drama, Ritska pays Captain Nemo a visit. Earlier, Tepeo felt bad about forfeiting his Shokta match with Marine 4. Wanting to assert his friendship, he gave Ritska the Shokta ball he made for Nemo, asking us to give it to the captain on his behalf. Even though that particular Nemo is dead, it's clear the captain can sincerely feel the gift's sentiment. Ominously, Trismegistus II finishes analyzing the data on Specimen E. Technically, it came from an alien world, sure, but that alien world was closer than we thought. That's right, Specimen E originated from inside Chaldeus, which we can now call the alien world. We've got one final scene that teases us even more about what's to come. Kirei and the Chaldean meet on the bleached earth. Remember the Chaldean said he'd consider us his enemy if we survived the Lost Belts? Well, it seems he's changed his mind. He suspects we won't just blindly follow Marisbury's plan, as he first feared we would. I guess the Chaldean, like Daybit, isn't a fan of what Chaldeus is up to. Kirei admits that he's been taking orders from Chaldeus this entire time. It was always Chaldeus' plan to have Ritska excise the Lost Belts, but now that it's actually happened, he needs new orders. U-olga Marie's spirit origin totally shattered in the fight against Ort, but apparently, parts of her can still be gathered into a soulless shell. Kirei has no intention of doing that, but suspects his other apostle, known as the Count, might give it a go. We find out that, in all, there were 7 apostles of the alien god, or rather, Chaldeus. Kirei, Muramasa, and Ashiadomen were meant to monitor the cryptors. Sherlock, Moriarty, and the Count were meant to monitor Chaldea. Then, to rule the apostles, there was u-olga Marie. Indeed, she wasn't the alien god after all. She didn't know it, but she was just another of the alien god's apostles. All that remain now are Kirei and this Count person. Technically, we've already met the Count, but he's so insanely obscure, I doubt you'd guess who without spoiling yourself. Fate Grand Order's story will continue on through a new arc called Ordeal Call. Japan has about 4 of them already released, or will soon. I'm sure that plot will answer lots of questions, but since I don't really know what's to come, here are some questions I still have that haven't been answered. What's up with Olga? How did you, Olga, apostle or otherwise, wind up using Chaldea's director as a vessel? If she really is Specimen E, then how did she come to Earth in response to Specimen E's crying for help? Seems like a paradox. I still want to know why the lab had exposed nerves and a stick. I'm deeply curious to know how Marsbury, while trying to preserve humanity, would have made humans the most despicable life form in the universe. That's a pretty bold statement. Who's the Chaldean? I had my own theory, but now I'm not very confident with it. Also, and I've been asking this from the very beginning, who or what exactly is this priestess of the alien god? I can't believe we made it through all 7 Lostbelts and still have no clue. Needless to say, Fate Grand Order is far from over. Does that excite you? Or is it about time for this story to finally come to an end? I'm curious, and you can bet I'll keep covering the lore as it drops in North America. Until next time, celebrate your fandom. Thanks for watching. This channel relies on support from viewers like you.
Please help us out by dropping a like and comment. Subscribe for more videos, and be sure to enable notifications. Or hit up our Discord so you never miss out on a new upload.
Most importantly, if you can spare it, please sign up as a channel member, either through YouTube, Patreon, or Subscribestar. You can find links in the description. We've got perks like exclusive content or early access.
Until next time,
Celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: VideoGamer75, Dante Pendragon, Steven Elak, Otaku Mom, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunarworks, Link Pendrago, Olympian Doll, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Major, Winter's Edge, Sneer Cachette, Dionysus, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Sith Lord 906, Vladimir Ovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, and Alistair Bernadotte. Thank you all so much.